Good evening. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission for the Municipality of Anchorage. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Dean?
Here.
Mr. Ferguson?
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Spring?
Here.
Mr. Strike?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Sporhays?
Here.
Mr. Cange?
Present.
Commissioner Barker is excused for this evening. Thank you.
We have no minutes. Commissioner Robinson, will you please do the disclosures?
Yes, sir. Any disclosures, Mr. Sporhays?
None, thank you.
Mr. Spring?
No.
Ms. Dean?
No.
Mr. Chair?
No.
Mr. Walker?
No disclosures.
Mr. Strike?
Yes, for an explanation, I'm going to be abstaining on case number 2013004 on the consent agenda. This property or this tower is located directly behind my current residence. And when this came before the commission approximately a year and a half ago, I actually testified as a constituent at that time. So I will abstain from that.
I think that sounds appropriate. Mr. Cange?
No disclosures, thank you.
And I have none.
Mr. Cange, will you please handle the consent agenda?
Thank you through the chair. In regard to the consent agenda, item 1A, resolution 2013-4, an appeal. Would anyone like to pull this from the consent agenda?
Seeing and hearing none. Mr. Cange, will you make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Thank you again through the chair. In regard to resolution 2013-004, I move to
Accept the entire consent agenda.
accept the entire consent agenda. Thank
Do
you.
we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we've received note, there we go. Our computer system may or may not be working tonight as we go. We have a motion by Mr. Cange. We have a second by Mr. Sporhays. Any objection? Any objection? Seeing and hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. We have one item on the agenda. Case 2014-0173 is going to be moved at the request of the petitioner to January 12th, 2015. Any objection? Seeing and hearing none, that item is moved. By a show of hands, who will not be here next week? Okay, so we've got 8. We got at least 6. We got to check with Ms. Barker on that one. Ms. Robinson?
I believe she said she would not be here.
I was trying to remember what she said. So, if something comes up if you didn't raise your hand, I'm expecting you to be here. And if something comes up, would you let me know as soon as possible? Because we could have the potential to a short board. Okay, the next item has a public hearing. The procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at its meeting is, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on that issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules and procedures. Petitioners, including all of his and hers representatives, 10 minutes, and part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, 5 minutes. Individuals, 3 minutes. There's a little light deal up here in front that starts with green. When it goes to yellow, you've got 1 minute left if you're speaking to help you schedule your time. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except Commission's recommendations to the Assembly, which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the Clerk's Office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is the Commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. An individual may request written findings from any Commission decision within 7 days. We will now take up case 2014-0155, Park Master Plan for South Anchorage Sports Park, Do we have a staff report, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is a 65-acre park. It's located on Track B Soccer and Baseball Subdivision, south of O'Malley Road, north of West Clatt Road, west of C Street, and east of Clatt Bog. It was zoned PLIP in 1998. The site is relatively level and has largely been cleared of vegetation. Soils are peat and organic overlaying silt and sandy silt. This is a request to approve an update of the master plan for the South Anchorage Sports Park. However, our records indicate that a site plan was approved in 1998 by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and a landscape plan was approved by the Urban Design Commission also in 1998. So it does appear that the current submittal is the first master plan for this park, unless the site plan is deemed a master plan. The 1998 site plan included 5 soccer fields, 3 American Legion-sized baseball fields, 4 Little League fields, a skateboard park, trail system playgrounds, open play areas, picnic shelters, and irrigation system concession stands, maintenance buildings, access road, and parking lots. However, the approval was subject to 4 conditions, but due to the peat soils and lack of a reliable water source, the improvements shown on the approved site plan were never fully implemented. In 1999, construction for the 380 parking spaces and 5 soccer fields and another baseball field began, and subsequent work included rehabilitation of a small pond and irrigation system for the soccer fields and construction of 2 of the 4 proposed Little League baseball fields. However, the soccer fields proved to be unsuitable due to the peat soils and frost heaves, and the irrigation system was not functioning adequately. The park is currently used by American Legion Baseball and Diamond West Little League. Off-leash dog area located in the southeast quadrant of the park is used year-round. There is a paintball vendor that operates in the northern end of the park, and the Anchorage radio-controlled race car also uses the southeast portion of the park, just east of the parking lot. There are 3 access drives to the park. One is from Timberlane Drive, which is stop sign controlled. A secondary access 200 feet west of the Timberlane access is a right-in, right-out only due to a median. And there is a 3rd access at the Tower Road. And these are all from West Clatt Road. In terms of utilities, AWW stated that water is not available and sanitary sewer is available to this parcel. The park is served by electricity and power is available at the pump house at the northeast corner of the park. Excuse me. And the American Legion field is also a lit ball field. So they have power to the ball field. that ball field. There is a stormwater drainage ditch. It runs along the park's north boundary, and it collects stormwater from both north and south of O'Malley Road. It travels west, and it eventually discharges to the Clatt Bog. There were comments from Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities. They're very concerned about the water feature. They do not want any drainage to enter O'Malley Road, and they are concerned that the drainage patterns may be changed as a result of proposed developments of the South Anchorage Sports Park, and those comments are included in the packet. There were 4 concept plans for the design of the South Anchorage Sports Park that were originally prepared, and there was an advisory committee that was established, as well as meetings with the 3 community councils in the South Anchorage area. And the 4 alternate plans were presented to the advisory committee, and a preferred alternative following discussions and meetings with the advisory committee did determine that there is a preferred alternative for the design and development of the park, and it's shown on page 36 of the South Anchorage Sports Park Master Plan. The design and layout of the preferred alternative, it does combine elements from the alternative options that were proposed. In terms of the Parks and Recreation Commission did hold a public meeting on August 14th, 2014, and they did approve the master plan. The Parks and Recreation Commission approved the master plan without any recommended changes, and their findings are in Parks and Recreation Commission Resolution 2014-17, which is included in the packet. In terms of a comprehensive plan, the park is classified by the Anchorage Bowl Park Natural Resource and Recreation Facility Plan as a special use area. And as a special use area, there are numbers of different types of parks, and sports parks are one of the parks that are identified in that particular use category. There are 330 parking spaces within the South Anchorage Sports Park currently, and ultimate approval of the required parking will be by the traffic engineer. Exterior lighting is proposed in the for the parking lots. However, one of the goals of the advisory group was to have better security within the park to prevent vandalism and illegal dumping, and better lighting for the park was viewed as a key element to improving security at the park. There are some there were some phone calls made to the planning department. It was mentioned that some areas of the park are very, very dark, and especially in winter, and that can be very dangerous, especially in the northwest corner of the park. An implementation plan was provided. It is a 10-year implementation plan. It is divided into tasks and elements within the tasks that need to be accomplished. The master plan does represent a 20-year vision for the park, and funding for the improvements of the park are a combination of a state grant and also specific user groups funding for any amenities for like baseball fields and radio-controlled race cars. They're often dependent on the user groups that are interested in a particular activity to raise the funds to accomplish improvements for those areas, because Parks and Recreation does not have the funding to provide all of the improvements, and they have long-term relied on fundraising by user groups. The department did recommend approval of the master plan, subject to 5 conditions on page 15 of the packet. There is an advisory comment regarding proposed use of the Clack Bog for trails or for access to the Clack Bog to the west. And there is a 6th condition that being presented for the Commission's consideration, and it deals with lighting, and it's a condition to consider providing a park lighting plan in the park plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we have any questions for staff? Commissioner Spring.
Through the chair, just real quick. So the implementation plan and the cost estimates, which were included in the packet, are going to be included as part of the plan when we adopt it, or if we adopt it?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Spring, that is one of the conditions. It is understood that it's a 10-year implementation, and that the cost estimates are probably based on today's prices. They're based on the costs that have been experienced for amenities in other parks within Anchorage. And maybe there could be a caveat or something to acknowledge that there would be changes over a 10-year period to the costs.
Do I have any other further questions for our staff? I have a couple questions for staff. I'm on page 15 of the staff packet. The department recommendations. Conditions 2, 3, and 4, and now 6 are worded oddly. Consider doing a study of AstroTurf. Now, that's not a department recommendation. We either should direct the applicant to do a study on AstroTurf, or we don't direct the applicant to do a study on AstroTurf, but to direct him to consider doing a study. I find the wording to be very awkward.
Mr. Chair, that was worded that way because the budget is tight. It may not be a priority of the implementation plan, and so it was intentionally not a you shall, but to consider it because it may not be feasible given the budget, but it would be it might be a helpful thing to undertake.
Would we make the same recommendation if this was Fred Meyers?
Mr. Chair, because of the funding source and the unavailability, oftentimes of the funding source, and the massive cuts that have been made to the Parks and Recreation Department, I don't believe that the Parks and Recreation Department is comparable to a Fred Meyer, which is a for-profit organization.
I don't believe that the code differentiates between for-profit or for non-profit, and we sit here and hold other people to a higher standard. I have problems with 2, 3, 4, and now 6, because we're not giving direction. We're giving them an absolutely, I mean, those might as well not be there. On that would be my opinion. Also, it's been my understanding that we were going to stop, as a cost savings, we were going to stop duplicating the packets we get from the applicant and with rerunning the pages, and yet we did that again in this packet, and I was wondering why.
Mr. Chair, we do have to make copies for the public, and so we do the public does not get what the commission gets in terms of the plan. So we do have to duplicate the entire thing for public viewing.
I understand that and I accept that, but we have basically 10 people up here, and I think we save 50 pages per applicant or per package. So I think we could save 500 pages, and I think it would be worthwhile to look at that and not duplicate the whole packet. It's much easier to follow through in here in color, and it's better reproduction, and yet we keep falling back.
Mr. Chair, I will take responsibility for this issue. We are trying to address this, but there are many details that go into processing all these cases, and sometimes things get missed. So we'll refocus our energy on this one.
Thank you very much. Mr. Walker.
Through the chair, for the staff, in the preferred alternative, it discusses, well, actually I should start out by saying in the 4 alternatives it discusses several uses, a lot of non-traditional type uses like the radio-controlled car track and the BMX track, those kinds of things. Under the preferred alternative in the staff packet, it only references 5 activities, being Little League fields, radio-controlled cars, community park, fenced dog park. Oh, and then it throws in a little blurb. There is one spot under the VRC thing about the bike park. But I guess I was confused by which one of the site plans coincides with this preferred alternative, because the plan wasn't clear on whether or not one of these site plans was. And so I was trying to match those 5 activities up with what I was seeing on these site plans, and I was having a little bit of trouble. So can you elaborate on that for me?
The preferred alternative, through the chair, Mr. Walker, is on page 47 of the packet. It is not in color, but it is in color in your report from the Parks and Recreation.
Oh, this packet? Okay.
Yeah. Page 19 of the colored report.
19 or 47?
19 of the color one. You can read it. You can't read the other one. Well, you pretty can. Lucky.
And then I did have we got some stuff laid on the table here. One of the comments was with respect to the radio control car.
Just 1 second, please. I don't think you're correct on page 47. That's the existing park.
No, 47 matches 19 in the plan, doesn't it?
Yeah, but that's the existing park. That's not the preferred alternative.
So 19 does not reflect the preferred alternative?
No.
Okay, that's what I thought. But I mean, shouldn't we be on page 27, 28, 29?
Page 64 matches what's on your website.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Walker, the preferred alternative is shown on page 85 of the packet.
Okay. Mr. Chair, may I proceed?
Yeah.
Okay. So there was 2 comments laid on the table tonight. One of them was with respect to the radio control car track, and it was a reference to moving the track from its current location to the west. And Mr. and Mrs. Horton, who made the comment, were concerned about the noise. Can you tell us, do they use gas-powered cars at this track or electric, or do they use both?
Through the chair, Mr. Walker, I defer to the applicant on that question because I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything further? Mr. Sporhees?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is, if the adjacent site, the 20 acres where Morrison Communication currently owns, it's a tower site, if they were to redevelop that land, would that affect your draft master plan for the park, or have they been notified at all on this?
Through the chair, Mr. Sporhees, as this was done in through the Parks and Recreation Department, we notified the public of this public hearing. But as for notification through the process of the draft plan, that would have been done through the Parks and Recreation Department. So I would have to defer to them for that question.
Thank you very much. I guess this might be a question for the staff, is that if this plan's approved and the park's approved and Morris Communication goes and they try and maybe get a rezone from AF to some kind of business zoning to redevelopment, would the park development hinder or affect that possible rezone as they have a 20-acre parcel there?
Well, the park's been there for quite some time, and if there was a business or a high-intensity use, if that square parcel was converted to a high-intensity use, I would think that that use would have an adverse impact on the park. In terms of, would it attract more traffic? Would the hours of operation be longer than the park? Would that affect the residential subdivision to the south, which is, there's a lengthy comment in the packet regarding the noise of the radio-controlled racetrack and concern about that noise. So I basically think that the impact would be on the park versus the park adversely impacting any commercial or high-intensity use there. It certainly would be, if there were employment on that square tower parcel, certainly a park would be a very pleasant amenity for any employees that would work there in the future if it were to be developed for commercial, retail, or some other non-AF use.
I agree, and I echo your thoughts. I appreciate you bringing that up. I was just looking for some clarification. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
Thank you. Two issues. One is the so staff recommendation includes well, Mr. Ferguson didn't like the way it was worded. It says check with the traffic engineers and see if the parking is sufficient. And yet there's a comment in here from traffic engineering say they have no comment on the master plan. It strikes me that, master planning, one of the most basic elements is things like access and parking, and while the intensity of uses could change, it certainly would be nice before it gets to us for traffic to have done that evaluation. And it's a little disappointing that they weren't caught beforehand to basically, clearly they were asked to provide a comment and they made it. So I'm either, if this was a private entity, I'd probably say they had their shot, it must be fine. And we might, deal with it like that. But it's, it's interesting that we have no sort of evaluation of whether the parking is sufficient or not. So can I just say, did you have conversations with them during this process?
To the chair, Mr. Robinson, no, I didn't.
Okay, and the second issue I had is I don't fully understand it. It talks about AWU tariff requiring extension of the water line along the full linear frontage of the lot. I know that's been an issue for all the properties down there because there is such significant linear footage when it comes to extending those utilities. And it goes on to say, well, it's unlikely that, the area further on would develop because it's a wetland and, yada, yada. But the plan doesn't really take a position as to whether they're going to go that route unless I'm missing something. The question that I would have is, would planning, particularly long-range planning, support a request for, that exception in light of, again, the reason for it is that you're extending for future development somewhere down the road. But I'm just a little hazy on what the plan intent is, and maybe when the petitioner's up here, they'll say, no, we're really not going to go with AWU, with what AWU, and we'd like to sort of make that firm in the record. But do you have a sense as to whether you would support the exception requested of AWU?
Through the chair, Mr. Robinson, it would be very costly to extend the main line, and clearly it appeared to me from reading the plan a couple of times that they would have a hard time extending it the full length. And there was some talk, I remember saying that they might consider septic for the toilets, but I don't understand. There may be mound systems or something that would allow on-site septic, but this is really pretty unsuitable soil for on-site septic. So perhaps they could, I do know that if there's any development further down the road, that developer further down the road would have to bear the entire cost. And typically it would be of a private developer, they would be required to extend the utility the length of their, or whatever it would take. I mean, on platting, I remember that, there was one plat that was required to extend in Eagle River, extend mainline water and sewer for 1,500 feet. And that was for a subdivision. And
No, and I appreciate it. I mean, I understand the issue. I think my question is, if they were to ask for an exception, is the planning department supportive of it? And if we knew the answer to that, we would make sure that it's reflected in our action here tonight. But it sounds like we're not real clear one way or the other whether planning would say, yeah, that's a good idea, reasonable idea to accept that exception.
through the chair, Mr. Robinson, I don't believe that the planning department has even considered an exception, much less to be able to give you an answer one way or the other.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions for staff? Mr. Kange.
Thank you, through the chair. More so a comment. I want to jump on the tails of this current conversation that the folks that were on this committee, almost every single one of them had a concern about water to this park. So I think it is something that, I couldn't support recommending the passage how it sits now without some consideration for the municipality, at least examining the cost of this to bring in water, considering the people that sat on your committee. And the majority of them were, water was a big concern for them. That's all.
Mr. Chair, just a clarification. Water is available to the site. It's sanitary sewer that is the concern, extending that main line.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, is the applicant present? Would they care to come forward? Would you state your name and spell it for the record, and then tell us how much time you would like to reserve for rebuttal?
My name's Steve Rafuse, last name R-A-F-U-S-E, and I'd like to save about 3 to 4 minutes for rebuttal.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
In 1998, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved the first site plan for the South Anchorage Sports Park. And at that time, it was envisioned that South Anchorage Sports Park would be the premier sports complex for South Anchorage. Since that time, we've seen 20% population growth in the area, and only 50% of the park has been developed. A lot of that has to do with some of the development challenges at the park. You have peat soils, relatively poor drainage in areas, a high water table, and an irrigation system that's never really fully lived up to its anticipated expectations. So today what we see is a lot of seasonal use at the park, very few amenities to attract the casual park user, and few eyes on the park. And this has led to some issues in recent years, specifically dumping, vandalism, theft, and all sorts of illegal activities that we prefer not take place at our parks. Also, the public has a negative perception of our management of the park, and so this has led us to this master planning effort. We started the process about a year ago. We did outreach. We went to 3 community councils in South Anchorage. USKH and Dwayne Adams did stakeholder interviews with organizations that are currently using the park, investing in the park. And then we formed an advisory group that had members of two community councils, a Parks and Recreation commissioner, a board member from the Animal Control Advisory Board, a park neighbor who's an avid dog walker, a representative from CIRI, and also representatives from the groups that use the park. And there were several common themes that came about in this process. Make the park active, make it attractive, provide year-round uses, bring people to the park, something for everybody, something for families. Make it realistic in the development, and recognize the limitations of the site. This is consistent with the 2006 park plan, which recognizes needs for community use facilities in South Anchorage. The park plan is an element of the Anchorage 2020 comprehensive plan. So this master plan provides a 20-year vision for the development of the park, provides a framework for future development, a mix of sports fields and community use facilities, something that's active, attractive, brings year-round use, and is realistic. Now, there's a high demand for high-quality facilities in South Anchorage. All parts of town have their iconic parks. You've got Kincaid in the west. You've got Russian Jack in the east, Delaney Park downtown. South Anchorage does not have that iconic park, and this is what we were going for and working with the advisory group is to develop a park that meets the expectations and needs of South Anchorage, and we hope that you approve the plan. Now, before I step away, I'd just like to address some of the comments of the planning staff and the commissioners. In terms of the AstroTurf study, we do have lots of data about developing these types of facilities. Anchorage School District has developed...
Speak to the mic.
Pardon me, excuse me.
Thank you.
Yeah. The Anchorage School District has been developing AstroTurf fields, and so we can pull data from this type of development in different places. Also, the RC Park, currently about 90% of the cars that are using the RC Park are electric. So they're running on electric motors. And on a given night, you'll have about 15 to 20 people who use those facilities. Also, in terms of the tower redevelopment, it shouldn't affect development of the South Anchorage Sports Park. We would be consulted if there's any other redevelopment or that was rezoned, and then we would come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Also about water to the park, Anchorage Parks and Recreation, the director has worked with the Boutte Company to do 2 studies on water and sewer and what are the feasibility and basic cost, just a general cost of what it would be to develop those facilities at the park.
All right, we have some questions up here. Ms. Dean and Mr. Robinson.
Through the chair, one of the things that the park is used for now is as a wood lot. What was the plan for the wood lot?
We closed the woodlot this summer, and it's opened up in another location in South Anchorage on private property.
Okay, and then the next question I have is when I look at on the far southwest corner, assuming that the bike park and the RC park are where they are, your parking lot is long and just parking spaces off the street. Is that just parallel to the street that is also used by the tower?
This is off of Tower Road, and this pretty much takes the same footprint that was on the original site plan, which was for 60 spaces,
Okay.
the 1998 site plan.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Robinson, then Mr. Sprague.
Thank you. Through the chair, can you clarify the water issue? And I mean, that's the task number 1 in the implementation plan, and the first line item is water and sewer extension in the cost estimate. So clearly, that's a big part of this development. To my earlier question, I couldn't understand if you were then going to apply for an exception to the requirement, and is that the case? And those conversations have already begun.
Sure. Through the chair to Commissioner Robinson. The Boutte Company put together some numbers in terms of bringing water, and in the conversations with AWU indicated that they would waive the tariff because of the property directly to the west, which is Clap Bog. It's under a permanent conservation easement, and it was unlikely that that property would need water facilities in the future. So they indicated at that time that it would be waived, but we would need to go ahead and have further conversations with AWU to verify that.
Great. Thank you. That helps.
Commissioner Sprague.
Yeah, through the chair, where's the nearest playground located?
The nearest playground is about a quarter mile, maybe less, just down the road at Pioneer Park. As you go down, as you go west on West Clatt Road, then it would be on the south side of the road.
Okay.
Just
quarter
near
mile?
Clatt, yeah.
What's the criteria for playgrounds? Does the park have standards for playgrounds?
We do have
distance and location.
We do have standards for playgrounds. We typically develop neighborhood playgrounds to a certain standard, and for primarily to provide a service for the local neighborhood. Something like the South Anchorage Sports Park, which we're looking at adding community use facilities such as a pavilion, a playground, open space. It would probably be a little bit more substantial because you would have a larger draw of the community. You'd be pulling not just folks from the neighborhood and families from the neighborhood, but throughout South Anchorage.
And the site plan, I can't tell if the site plan, through the chair, has any lights around the lake or near the dog park. Is there any plan for lighting?
In this plan, the advisory group had talked about minimizing light pollution, and it was recognized that some people go out, use the park for stargazing and looking up the stars and appreciating that dark space. I think we would need to consider it because one of the things the advisory group did point out is a need for trails within the park, linking areas of the park, and just to provide nice recreation. So I think we would need to consider adding lighting. And they do make lighting, like LED lighting, that is at a pedestrian level that wouldn't cause light pollution to be directed down. That'd be something we would need to look into.
And one more comment, question through the chair. The plan calls for making it more year-round park.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand why. It seems like since there's lots of mosquitoes and there's wind, and winter might actually be more pleasant without bugs there. But I don't see really follow through on that. And here you have, I like the lake idea a lot. I think that's a great idea. But why not make it or recommend making that into a winter ice skating pond, similar to how the Cuddy Park is used. And of course, they have lights around there. And to make it really work, it'd be nice to have a pavilion nearby, or maybe some warming hut, or lights would be good too, and benches. I mean, if you're really going to, why not just make it into an ice skating pond if you're going to go to all the trouble and expense to do that? Mm-hmm. Maybe a little sledding hill or something to kind of accentuate the winter use in that area. That seems to be a popular thing for most parks, for winter uses anyway. And it's pretty flat, I think. You'd have to bring in some material to do that. But that might be complementary to the ice skating pond, along in that northern area. And to further that concept, it seems like you have a community park concept where more passive, informal type of element to the park. But I don't necessarily think it really works where it's located on the south side of the park. I mean, there really isn't any feature that's very interesting there. I mean, it's just flat. You're going to vegetate it. You're going to put trees in, and trees are going to be small to begin with, obviously, and it'll take a long time to grow. Why not congregate that around a natural feature like a lake, and make that the center of the community park, more informal, where you have a reason to go there. You could sit there and look at the lake, or you could go ice skating, or maybe even put the playground in that area, similar to what they did to Cuddy Midtown Park. They congregated those things together and concentrated it in one area, and maybe utilize the existing open space for maybe the paintball field or something. Move that down there and move the more community park informal area around the lake, if indeed you can make the lake, if it works, that is. Seems like that might make it more interesting community park concept. Everybody's a park planner, so take that for whatever it's worth.
Any other questions? I have a couple questions. One, I commend you. I like to see a park with multiple uses. I don't like to see just a park with one use that we have to build restrooms and parking lots for that aren't used. So I like to see the other facilities. I like the idea of an ice skating lake up on the north there. So as long as you can figure a way to keep the geese out of the lake during the summer, that would be nice. I like the idea of a sledding hill, only I chose the open space down below. I would like to suggest maybe a couple picnic pavilions around that would try to bring use to it. I have challenged to try to get a soccer field or two in here someplace, or maybe the open space could work for just the kids to kick the ball around. Your paintball, and this is going off of memory that is getting old, but I think the city has a prohibition against paintball on city property. So you may want to look into how you would handle that. There's a city park off of Rabbit Creek Road in Old Seward that's down over the hill that nobody knows about. But there's a couple signs down there that says paintball prohibited on city property with an ordinance number. So you may want to figure out how to handle that. Our radio control park, do they have a PA system there?
Not currently, no.
Well, because normally that's where most of the sound issues come from. Maybe a prohibition on a PA system there, or a prohibition on hours of use might alleviate some of the neighbors' concerns. Why was the radio-controlled park moved?
To the Commissioner, the radio control park was moved over to be located next to the bike park to combine similar uses. You're going to have similar maintenance. You're going to have dirt, so you're going to have similar maintenance. So being able to combine those like uses. Also, with the community park facility and the community park idea, having open space and a pavilion and playground equipment and picnic areas, having all of that are complementary uses. So by returning the area that's currently houses the RC park, returning that into grass space, that can be an area for tots to have soccer practice or for families to have picnics. Or another idea was to perhaps even host like the South Anchorage Farmers Market at the park.
Most farmer markets parking near the vendor space is the part that draws it. If you got to park a block away, you're not going to go to the farmer market. If you could park 150 feet away, you're going to go to the market. If I can be incorrect here for a minute, paintball is somewhat of a rowdy activity. And my son participates in paintball, so anyway, you can deduce that my son's rowdy. So why don't you put the paintball back in the corner and put the dogs where it's closer to parking?
I suppose either could work, but this is the idea that came about from the advisory group.
We've gotten comments that the dog walkers like the access better and on that. Okay, I have no further comments. You have 6 minutes for rebuttal, so we'll open it up to public testimony now, and then after that's done, you have the opportunity to rebut on that. Thank you very much for your presentation. We're now open to public comment on the case 2014-0155, the master plan for the South Anchorage Sports Park. If you'd like to testify, please come forward. Don't all come at once. When you get up here, would you please state your name and spell it for the record, please?
Sure. My name is Jody Willing, Jody with a Y, W-I-L-L-I-N-G. I live close to the dog park, and I use it every day. I happen to be one of the dog walkers. I have a few concerns. My primary concern is the lack of notification. As your staff mentioned, they didn't notify the people who have the property where the tower is. They also didn't notify any of the people who lived in the community. When I talked to Steve today from Parks and Rec, he said no, he didn't notify anybody either, that Planning and Zoning notified us. Well, I can tell you, as someone who's lived here for 13 years, we weren't notified. And then as I talked to both of them, they said, well, we did talk to the community councils, and so we would assume that you would know through the community councils. Well, I get up at 4 o'clock every morning, and so I don't go to a lot of later meetings, though I've been in real estate and property management, I was for 20 years, and so I'm not against development, don't get me wrong. But I am against for due process, and I don't think that notification and due process has happened here. I just happened to notice on a sign by the road, Planning and Zoning had put something up about the park. And so I called last week right before Thanksgiving, and I found out about it. So when I went to the dog park the next day, and I asked the 20 people that I saw at the dog park, not one of us, and everyone lived in the neighborhood, knew about these changes. So that's my first concern. My second concern is the fact that the people who walk our dogs, we're the people that year-round use the park. As you all said, it's not being used. And we are relegated to this very small area with a fence around it up in the corner. Well, I can tell you that all of us now walk this entire park, especially in the wintertime. And one of the reasons I really like this park is I do like the fact that it's a multi-use park and that people are very respectful and that they seem to be able to work together as different users, and they seem to be able to do that in a nice way. And so now it seems like there's a small group, maybe who was on this committee, that has some concerns about the dogs. So they want the dogs fenced off in this little corner. Well, I have a Labrador, and actually many of us in Alaska have larger dogs. And I even did a little bit of research and found out that 37% of all households have dogs. And I looked at how many households there were for 99515, and there's 20,000. And then I looked at that, and then I did the math on that, and that would be 8,000 dogs. And if you did 1.6 dogs, which is what they attribute, that would be about 13,000 dogs. I know my time is done, but I'm probably the only person who's there every day. And there's a lot of stuff you guys have missed in all of this.
You'll have an opportunity. We have a number of questions to ask you, so please
Okay.
stand there, please. Ms. Dean, then Mr. Robinson.
Through the chair, do you normally walk to the park or do you park at the park?
I park at the park.
Do you ever have issues with your car getting broken into? Anybody around there getting their cars broken into?
I park in the front. I do not park in the back where they want the dog people to park because I've heard their cars have been broken into. So I don't park there.
Do you walk only during when it's daylight, or do you ever walk
I
at night?
only walk during the daylight, and I'm quite concerned about the fact that this very dark park, that there are muggers and rapists out there, and they've decided not to put any lighting in it. It seems short-sighted to me.
I use the Campbell Track Park, and they put in cameras and lights, and the lights are very low, but they work great. And once they put the lights and the cameras in, we didn't have any more break-ins. Made a huge difference.
Great.
But yeah, I was just kind of curious where you guys are parking if you're walking, because I have walked over there a little bit, not a lot. And I was just kind of curious what the patterns were. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Robinson, then Mr. Spring.
Thank you. I just want to clarify. My understanding of the fenced dog park is that's an off-leash area, and nothing's preventing any dog owner from walking throughout the park. But I think the distinction is leash and off-leash. Is that your understanding of the plan, and or are you advocating for just a larger off-leash area?
Well, at least in the wintertime, I think the whole thing could be off-leash. I have not seen any problems, and I mean, truly, we are, well, honestly, we're all walking there now already. We walk all the way around here and walk and, give our dog exercise. And they all interact, and many people do it in the summertime, and they interact just fine without having some sort of negative problems. So, yes, I think it should all be off-leash.
I'd like to follow up on your lack of notice. Do you mind giving me your address?
2120 Montague Bay Circle, 99515.
Staff, I'd like to know if a notice went out to that address or not, or if it did not go out, was it outside the zone or something on that?
They said they didn't send them out to anyone.
No, well, that's not what the packet says, and that's the packet says by November 12th, which the wording's different. 135 notices to property owners and 148 notices to residents were mailed, with one notice returned. And so I'm just trying to.
There's like 5,000 of us who live around there. Really? 135 of us were notified?
In fairness to staff, their instructions, we have specific areas and boundaries and on that people who notify. And I'm trying to understand where the problem is in the system is what I'm trying to solve right now.
I appreciate that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am?
it appears that Montague Bay Circle is outside the 500-foot notification area.
Okay. All right. Thank you, staff. That at least answers that question. Thank you very much for your testimony. I don't see any further questions. Will the next person please come forward?
All right, my name's Ken Best. I represent the RC Car Club and, that general user group. There seems to be a concern regarding noise. And to answer the question about PA, we don't really have a PA per se. We do use like a megaphone deal. But it's a once a week occurrence that we do that. It's for about 3 hours. It's usually on a weeknight. And we're done to, at about 10 with the whole, we got the noise regulation and all that. So, and the other thing is, all these cars that these guys have, most of them are electric now, so that keeps all the noise level considerably lower. It is used regularly, but during the week, in the evenings and stuff like that, there's usually only a handful that actually use the facility. It is used, from the time the snow melts until the time the snow shows up. So it is regularly used, but yeah, for all intents and purposes, noise. And so far, and I've been running the club for the last 7 years, and we haven't had any problem with noise that I know of. So I think that's about all I got.
Okay, we got one question. Ms. Dean?
Just curious about airplanes and RC airplanes. Do you have them in your club too?
No, I don't represent that. I just represent the user group that uses that track.
Okay.
Those are pretty much independent individuals that are out there using that.
I used to live in a community that actually had a mini airport just for that group.
Yeah, I think that group was actually contacted, but they chose not to participate in the whole thing.
But it's a separate group from you guys.
Yeah, separate group for sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I take it your megaphone is powered?
What's that?
Your megaphone is powered?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't see any, I do. Brandon, Mr. Walker?
So you're, and I just want to drill down on this megaphone issue because I'm guessing these people are here tonight. We're going to need to talk about this. So you're only using it on the weekends, and you just said you use it until 10 p.m. Is that right? Or because I think isn't it 7 to 7? Jim?
You have to ask staff.
Is staff? Can you comment on that? I think isn't the noise ordinance is in the summertime you can use like construction tools 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. something like that.
Through the chair, Mr. Walker, we will have to confirm, but I don't think that is true. I think it's 7 to 10.
Okay. All right. Well, I just wanted to kind of get a drill down on that. So you guys are you're aware of whatever that time is, and you're discontinuing your use of the megaphone.
Yeah, we used to do it when the gas powered vehicles were a little more popular. We also did, at least on our race nights, we always enforced, 10 o'clock, everybody's got to shut down, that sort of thing. So yeah, we're very aware of the noise regulations and things like that. But lately, especially, it hasn't really been much of an issue.
And you're not using that. So this is for races, I'm assuming. Then on weeknights, you're just practicing. You're not.
Yeah, it's open, to whoever wants to go down there. Like I said, there's always a handful of people down there at any given moment. It's always kind of funny because the baseball fields across the way, they're mostly getting used, it seems, by the dog walkers, and then it gets used, by the baseball heavily for what seems like a split second, but our little track down there is getting used almost daily by people, and it's the only place in town where you can actually run them, without worrying about running into cars and things like that.
Do you have any thoughts on the swapping the location?
We're flexible. My only thing is I want to be part of the master plan because we're not on there currently, so we just want to keep a place to race.
You're doing it the right way. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Come on down. We don't bite.
My name is Debbie Baird.
Debbie, pull that down a little bit so you don't have to stretch.
And in the master plan where the RC park is going to be, it's right across from where I live.
Okay.
And I go to bed early at night. And where the RC park is now is perfect because the slope up provide a natural sound barrier to their activities. So I am not in favor of them moving the RC park over in front of where my bedroom window looks out at.
Okay. You done?
No, and I have another thing. I do walk my dog every day, and I walk my dog at like 6 in the morning, so I do walk my dog in the dark a lot. And I have to walk up and down the side fence. It would be nice to have more lighting out there. And it is scary. There are sometimes when you're walking your dog, there's people parked there, and you don't know what they're doing. So.
Do we have any questions for her? How do you spell your last name, ma'am?
B-A-I-R-D.
We would have missed that. Thank you very much for your testimony, ma'am.
Great, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bob Hoffman. I'm the president of the Community Council of Bayshore Clat. This process has been, the 10 years I think I've been the president, we've gone through this process multiple times. This is the furthest that it's come. This is the most promising plan that has come out of past failed attempts by the municipality to get this park built out the way it should be. We are way behind getting this done. This was a community effort. I sat on the community, the board, the group. Several members are here tonight. It was all agreed upon that this is an eyesore. The tree dump that you talked about was forced on us without any input by our side or knowledge. And it's just put right down in the middle of it. We've been mistreated at this park in our community for a long time. This is a great plan. I fully endorse it. It's been to our council multiple times. The council has approved it. I'm speaking on that behalf to make sure that you understand that we've gone through the process and we approved this plan the way it is. Now, there's been some other comments and such tonight. I would like to answer or speak to some of those. The RC park it's not a noisemaker. I guess if you're right next to it, it could be. The layout of the park, the way it is now, there's been suggestions about moving things around. A lot of consideration was done to keep activities apart. We don't want the dogs chasing the cars. We don't want the dogs chasing the kids. We don't want the paintball shooting the dogs. They're separated for a reason. That was a big consideration and time was spent on that effort. Taking pot shots at it now to rearrange things, that's not quite fair. It would have to go back, I think, into further discussion. The soccer fields questions, I believe that they were approached and they said no soccer fields. They wanted to, that was originally designed, they had no interest in maintaining those fields anymore. They said they had enough fields, so no more. So that's off the table and that's why they're not there. Dog training, we had a member of the dog community there that handles the training and such. They're all for the fenced-in areas, the way it's split around the water area. We are also looking at, and I talked to Anchorage Parks about this, about expanding dog runs into the conservative lands. We can put small trails into that area, so those dogs will have much longer open space runs. They're interested in that for training dogs for retrieval and such. So this is an adjacent to the property. That's not part of this, but that's in the future. The question about notices, I put out numerous notices through the community council, through our email system. That's our only system we have now. If people are not signed up on it, we try to get the word out the best we can. We have noticed this particular one since, when did we start? March? April? I've been putting them out faithfully out. If they're on the boards, I know it's hard to do. It's a big problem. There's a lot of people not getting the message. I can only do so much. Dogs into the park. There's lots of dogs now. I go by at night in the winter, 10 o'clock at night. It's pitch black out there, and there'll be a set of headlights. People out in the middle of the park doing who knows what. Presumably some are with dogs. I don't know about the others. The question brought up about the bike park, BMX park. It's not a BMX park. We already have those in town. This is going to be a pump park, something different. And you'll have to do a little research on what that brings in. And we do have walkways built into it, so you can walk dogs, walk kids, and go from one end of the park on a, not a paved pathway, but a mulch-type pathway, so dogs can walk on it. So a lot of consideration was given to that, since we're moving the dog area from the easy access into more of the back area. And at that, any other questions?
Commissioner Spring?
Yes, to the chair. Did your community council or any group you were involved with consider lighting for the park, and what was your conclusion about that?
As I recall, we discussed lighting, because it is dark in the park, and it will need lighting. Now, to what degree, I don't think we're looking for tower lighting and such. But
So nobody was opposing that
I don't
lighting?
think there'd be any opposition to lighting it.
And a follow-up question through the chair is, did anybody discuss winter uses like ice skating and or sledding hills? Was that ever brought up as part
I
of
think the ice skating will just happen. You know, I don't recall it being specifically brought up, but it's certainly not closed off. It's a shallow pond. It would be perfect for that. Just have to get somebody to maintain it.
Yeah, the parks that are used are hot mopped and they're
Right.
plowed and all that stuff.
Someone will have to take that on, but.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
No further questions. Thank you for your testimony.
Okay.
Move on down. Move on down.
Oh.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Betty Hertz, Hertz. I am a dog park person, and when I heard through the communication of the Community Council that something was going to be happening at the South Anchorage Park, my hackles went up immediately because I figured, oh boy, here we go. They're going to put in more soccer fields, more tennis courts, and we're going to get rid of the dog park. So I volunteered and hassled Steve until he put me on the advisory committee. And of course, my idea was that I think the whole 60-plus acres should be a dog park. However, there were other people on the committee who didn't share that view. So what I discovered was that this was a process that worked. I went in expecting it not to work. We had 3 advisory committee meetings, and at each meeting, each person who had interest in the park usage got to speak, and I think it was a very good give and take and compromise. One of the big issues is with this park right now, the dog park wasn't defined. It isn't defined. And yes, I'm one of those who parks in the first parking lot and uses the whole area for the dog park. But it is a multi-use park. And so that needed to be defined, and that's why it was moved to the back area. Some of the things that we talked about to make it better use for the dogs is that we have very few areas with water access if we want to train dogs for any kind of field work, retrieving work in the water. And so that was one reason. Now the mosquito issue, well, that's living in Alaska. We also talked about, having it off leash, but also having it fenced so that we don't interfere with other activities that are going to go on in the park. There's nothing that prevents a person from starting in the first parking lot with their dog on leash and walking to the off-leash section. So much as I said, I would love to see the whole area be a dog park, I certainly understand the need for multi-use. I also am a resident that lives close by to the park, and in my mind, any improvements that we can make are going to give us more of a sense of community. And of course, it reflects on property values and all that jazz. As far as the water feature, some of our discussion I think we talked about was similar to what happened in Midtown, maybe not on such a grand scale, but something like that would be very doable and very useful and would give that winter use. And it was funny that someone mentioned the sledding hill. I was thinking about that today, that that's a thing that kids like, and we don't have that built in, but it's a possibility. I would like to thank you for considering this. I think we've got a precious property that needs to be further developed so that it has good community use.
We have some questions, so stay right there, please. Ms. Dean?
Through the chair, thanks for putting the time in on this. There's quite a large group of people, it looks like, that met, but you met 3 times to discuss options. Do you ever park there at night?
Not usually, no.
Not comfortable?
Not comfortable, no.
Now there's going to be a fair amount of use then towards the back.
Excuse me?
There's going to be a fair amount of use then towards the back.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is the fence against O'Malley so that kids, dogs, et cetera, won't run out onto O'Malley.
Mm-hmm.
That will help. But you also have a fence on here between the bog and the dog park area. Are you still considering, it shows on the map there a fence. Do you want a fence between that and the bog?
Between what and what?
The dog area and the bog? I would think you would want to be able to continue.
Well, we talked about an opening at one point in the fence that could go over into the bog wetlands area. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, it looks like it's a fenced dog area.
Yeah. And then there's a small fenced dog area that we talked about for using for outdoor training because we don't have an outdoor training field,
Right.
like if for agility or obedience training, and also for small dogs, having a fenced area that people who would feel more comfortable in a small fenced area for their small dogs. So that's that area that says agility training. Is that what you're looking at?
Farther to the west there's another. It looks to me like it's a fence. Maybe it's just the borderline. I thought it was the fence between.
Oh, and there is some fencing there too, but it's a fenced off-leash area.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and, talking about the agility equipment area, it's quite a haul to haul the equipment from the parking area.
That's why I don't do agility.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff with agility.
But my thought was for obedience training, having a designated area. But yeah, if someone would have to haul gear a ways.
So, yeah. Okay. Just curious what you were thinking. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Will the next person please come forward?
My name is Ronald Baird. I live at 1021 Allison Circle. I submitted a letter, I think it's in your packet, dated November 20th. I've lived in my home for 15 years. I was there before any of the stakeholders that were asked to the meeting were even in the park, because there was no park. It was basically the Klatt homestead developed into a few soccer fields. My letter says that there were 12 homes affected, viewshed affected by this plan. It's actually 14. There are 10.
Mr. Baird, will you hang on 1 second? I don't believe we have a copy of your letter. When did you submit it?
It's dated November 20th. It was attached. Oh, no. Oh, no.
108.
It's
Okay. We're just trying, we got to find it up here.
Oh, okay. It starts on page 104.
Okay, all right. Okay. Go ahead, sir. I apologize.
There are 11 homes on Allison Circle that face directly the park. In addition, there's 3 in Kalen Circle, by virtue of their orientation, will look directly on, for example, the site of the relocated RC track. This was a discrete group with a specific interest. It's a unique feature of this park that it's unobstructed in its view from these homes. And it's not the garage, it's the living areas, the second level decks. That's where the impact is. I would have really liked to have gotten notice, contacted my neighbors, participated in the process as a stakeholder, because I think we are. The combined value here is $5 million, according to the assessor. I don't have a problem with other users. I'm just saying we should have had a seat at the table. The result of our omission is that there's no mention at all of this significant fact in the plan, that it's in our viewshed. I thought that was basic urban planning, but it's completely omitted from the plan. What the plan also doesn't say is what is the necessity for this track and this bike park to be in this particular park? What are the other locations? Neither the plan nor staff report answers that question. Secondly, what is the necessity of the RC track and bike park to be at this specific location? We got a little bit of explanation of that, but you won't find any discussion in the plan. And by the way, I don't fault my community council representative. I thank him for his service. It's a volunteer job. I'm just saying there was an oversight here. I have a few more minutes, please.
We can give you one more minute. Okay, so hit your high points.
So the request is to restart the public process at some point, allow us to be a stakeholder. If the commission wants to proceed tonight, then and wants my suggestion, I would of course swap the places of the RC park and the open space out of the flex field. I don't know why people thought this, the view that I'm concerned about is at page 38 of the plan. That's what I'm concerned about looking at. I don't think anybody in this room would want to look at that from their home. And there just doesn't seem to be any justification for doing that. The last point I will make is the plan assumes that Tower Road is available as a point of access. I don't know who did this, but within the last month or so, there is now a very expensive gate at Tower Road and Clatt Road. It says no trespassing. It says the Morris Group. It completely blocks access. I have no information other than somebody has gone to a great deal of trouble to block that up. I can say that the end of Tower Road is a dumping zone in the preservation wetlands to the left of Tower Road. It's happened year after year. The plan is going to utilize and make this road available, but it doesn't really address the illegal dumping. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, sir. Can I have, by a show of hands, how many other people wish to speak? Okay, we'll take these 3 or 4. I can't tell how many are behind the board here, and then we'll probably take a recess.
Don't hide.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Steve Beardsley, B-E-A-R-D-S-L-E-Y. I'm president of the Old Seward Ocean View Community Council. Been that way for a few years. Yes, we did receive notice and did have a presentation from the staff. My wife and I both did serve on the advisory committee of this with notice. Our community council has not had a resolution per se on this park, but we're willing to do that. We don't find any problems with this. As a former park commissioner of 7 years, master plans are a 10,000-foot view, not a 30,000-foot view, but more of a flexibility usage. I think staff has contacted as many user groups that would be interested in this park, knowing some of its history. I did work for Mr. Clatt in probably the early 80s, so I know this area when he sent me out there to find his area out there, and he just motioned, go this way, go that way, as I was in hip boots. The growth of this park has been kind of halted a little bit. This process that has been going on for, as Bob said, from Bayshore Clatt, it's been going on for quite a while. It's been a dumping ground. It's been a wood lot. It's gone through processes. It's now time to show that this park can really be a gem in South Anchorage, not just as a sports park, but as a community park. Perhaps not a destination park that everybody would come to for like Kincaid, Midtown, Cuddy Park, but a park that more users can utilize it. It does have a dog park within it. It has been a dedicated dog park, but the designation has been not boundaried. So thus, the entire park has become the entire park has become usage by dogs anywhere. You see that constantly. They're on the baseball fields, they're on the north side, they're continually, and I don't blame them for doing that, because we haven't given the designation to it. A smaller lot for dog training, fenced for little guys, is needed in this town. There's no other town that has this except I think the one off of Arctic has now a fenced dog park for different sizes of dogs. Park and Recreation Commission as well as staff has looked at the dog park issue for many years and faced opposition on both behalves. But this gives some designation for the dog users to have a larger area to work their big dogs and do it in a safe manner. The designation of where the things are has that term flexibility. This isn't turf view. This is kind of 10,000 foot view of what this park could look like with the users. The border may look like a border, but it might be a fence later, it may not. This is a 10-year plan, maybe a 20-year plan, and who knows what's going to happen to Anchorage in 20 years. Master plans can be amended through a process, a public process, to amend it to match the new users. It's happened at Cuddy Park, right out here, with a pond coming up from Fish Creek, opening up streams. This park doesn't have a stream. It's a bog. And bogs can have water features. May not be really deep, but there's water features instead of a ditch that contains it. So let South Anchorage Sports Park show it to be a gem. Let us take this command of this park and show that user groups can get along. User groups of many varieties know what to do. It's happening now with the dogs and the baseball and the motor guys, but it's with some designation, and I think that's true.
We have a question, Mr. Spring?
Yes, through the chair. You brought up a question that issue that I was going to raise.
My ears don't work really well. If you'll sit closer to your mic, I'd appreciate it.
I'd have to swallow it if I did.
Okay.
You brought up a question that I was going to ask staff. Maybe is something that staff will have to answer, but I was curious about what the actual designation of the dog park is. I know when it was originally adopted, the assembly designated certain areas of the city as dog parks.
Correct.
And I thought that they were more or less defined as the boundaries, but maybe not. I don't know. In this case, is this actually a designated dog park?
I think if you look at the original plat,
what is the actual boundaries of the dog park?
I think if you look at the original plan of this park, you'll see that it's between the ball fields. If my memory serves me right.
What I'm referring to is the ordinance that adopted dog park uses in the town that was adopted by the assembly, not the previous site plan.
Okay.
It's something the staff maybe can answer, I think.
To my designation, my view, I think there was 4, perhaps 5 dog parks that were dedicated as dog parks. How they went through that process involved years of public testimony and that kind of stuff.
And this was one of those?
My memory doesn't bring it up as being a...
Staff could answer that
Sure.
with a rebut.
It's one of the 5.
And the whole park was designated as a dog park?
No, on page 19 of the plan, it shows more or less the footprint of the dog park as on the...
If you didn't hear him, it's on page 19, showing the original plat of the dog park.
19 of the plan.
Oh, we don't know. Hold on. We'll give you the packet number in a minute.
So, okay, then follow-up then. Thank you for the staff clarification. Then would that have to be changed as an ordinance then? Would it have to be redesignated through the assembly since that was I think it was an ordinance that would designated them?
It's unclear. I don't really know if the location within South Anchorage is specific to that assembly ordinance. I apologize, but we'll figure that out. I do know that one of the subsequent plans that the UDC looked at had even a different place drawn, a different proposed place for the dog park. So anyway, we'll figure that out.
Well, would you state your name, please?
My apologies. I'm Holly Spoth Torres. I'm the park superintendent.
Thank you. Okay. We have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, we had two other people raise their hand. Come forward, sir.
Good evening. My name is Tom Rayfield. I represent the Morse Communications Group. We have no objection to the park, and actually we're all for it. Our main concern is the control of the uses out at the park. We were having issues with the paintball people, which has been resolved by the area that they're in now. Our other concern is the dog walkers that don't seem to understand that they need to stay in the dog park and not over into the wetland area of our tower site. So we're looking at having the municipality or the park system continue the fencing around our area and keep all the other users in the areas that they're supposed to be in. And that's about all.
We have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
Ms. Dean, then Mr. Spring.
Through the chair, it was mentioned by somebody that you guys have put a gate across Tower Road.
Yes, we have.
Now, is it right there at Clatt, or is it farther up?
It's about 40 feet off of Clatt Road.
But your property line is not there. It's farther up the road,
That
correct?
is correct.
So how can you fence something that you
This
don't?
was a deal between the municipality, the parks, and us to control all of the dumping in that area. We were having issue with cars being dumped in there, the other gates in further being blocked, fish totes, grass, lumber, trees, and so forth.
So
And it was costing quite a bit to keep that clear.
So you guys have paid for the fence and
Yes.
installed it? Do you
Yes.
have a letter from the Parks Department
Yes.
saying that? Okay. It just would have been nice for us to know about that as part of this.
I think we're all having a communication problem.
Thank you.
Okay, hang on.
Yeah, and we'd like to be on the list that gets notified also. We found out about the meeting by the signs that were posted along the road. So it would be nice if we were involved also.
I personally find it
What was that?
disconcerting that you were not notified
No.
as an adjacent landowner. Yeah,
I mean, we
think
went
we
through.
have the obligation to notify you.
Yeah, we went through a considerable amount of discussions and other things to have our piece of property out there the way it is, and so that it kind of didn't impact anybody else.
Mr. Voorhees, then Mr. Spring.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rayfield, so kind of to get a consensus of your testimony, through the three examples, Morse Communications on your behalf supports the park and the plan going forward, but the main concern is trespass on your guys' property. So as long as that was handled, you'd be a proponent going forward, correct? Thank you.
Mr. Spring.
You probably know the answer to this question. Is there a right-of-way, a publicly dedicated right-of-way that includes Tower Road?
I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Is it a publicly dedicated road, or is it a private road?
Tower Road?
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay, that's something staff will probably be able to answer.
Mr. Chair, if I may, it appears to be platted, just looking at some of the mapping and aerial imagery that's available at a glance online. So, but I think it's a privately developed driveway in a public right-of-way, which oftentimes those are privately maintained and privately controlled. So.
Okay. Mr. Voorhees?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Airfield, since we're on the discussion of this Tower Road, it seems like through your testimony that you by Morrison worked to deal with the municipality and the parks to prevent a problem, which is dumping down on your guys' property. If the park plan was to go forth, would you have any procedural problems with maybe removing the gate from Klatt and Tower Road and pushing it further down towards where your guys' property line starts?
We have a gate on our property line, and but with all the additional issues and problems we were having, the three entities came together with putting that road down there. If it develops into the sport park and they're going to use that for parking, I don't see where there'd be an issue with moving it, because then you'd have more activity and so forth in the area, and it would be patrolled and kept under control. To where now it's just a back road for everybody to dump stuff.
Mr. Airfield, thank you very much for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Are you done, Mr. Voorhees? Ms. O'Brien?
Mr. Chair, Tower Road is dedicated to the south boundary of the Tower subdivision, and it's got a roundabout, a turnaround at the north end of the road. It would be the south boundary of the Tower property.
Were you aware of the agreement between the Park Service and Morris and the city?
Mr. Chair, no.
Thank you. All right. We have no other questions in the queue. Thank you for your informative testimony, sir. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Sometimes we can use all the help we can get.
Good evening. My name is Dave Carter. I'll try and make this as quick as possible. Do you just spell my last name?
Yes, please.
C-A-R-T-E-R.
Thank you.
Okay. I am a vice president of the Bayshore Klatt Community Council, so Mr. Hoffman and I are on the same community council. I did want to begin by thanking Parks and Rec and Stephen Hawley for including user groups and the community councils. It's very important that that happen, and it did happen in this case. And as Mr. Hoffman said, a number of people put in a lot of time and effort on this, and some parts of this park have been an eyesore for us, including a woodlot dump and things of that nature. So I would urge, passage of this and move this process along. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I would probably just be duplicating a lot of the comments that have been made here. But a lot of work has gone into this. We haven't had anyone come to our meetings and say, I object to this or some aspect of this. But that's just Bayshore Klatt, but I can't speak for the other community councils. But we've been dealing with this for a number of months, and of course the park has been around for a long time now, so we'd like to move it along. Thank you very much.
I have no further questions. Thank you for your testimony. Does anyone else choose to testify? Anyone else at all? Going once? Going twice? The public testimony on case 2014-0155 is now closed. We will take about a 7-minute recess, and then we'll come back and deliberate on this case. Thank you for your testimony. Hang on. And when we come back, we will take the rebuttal. You got rebuttal time. And then we will close the public hearing.
It was, and the cost of developing lighting. It's not that, the way I remember, it's not that everyone was opposed to lighting if it was done with some thought.
Right. Well, because we had to plug it from sewer.
Right.
And feed the park, and it wasn't cost effective or efficient.
Yeah, I don't know.
Take our correct seats, Ms. McConnell. Ladies, thank you. I made a procedure error when I closed the public hearing before the applicant had the rebuttal time, so we'll reopen the public hearing for the applicant's rebuttal time, and then we'll close the public hearing. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. I think I just wanted to open it up to any questions after you heard some of the public comment, and perhaps I can respond to that. Any questions that the commissioners
Commissioners,
might
do
have?
we have any questions? We have several. Commissioner Strike and then Commissioner Spring.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. One short question here, and that is the what type of landscaping might be proposed along Clatt Road?
This is really better suited to a landscape architect, this question, but I think that in doing the planning for this project, we had recognized the landowners to the south of West Clatt Road, and we wrote into the plan that when we begin developing the RC park and the bike park to include landscaping, so my guess is it would be some combination of deciduous trees and evergreens and shrubs, something that would provide a visual barrier.
But it is in the plan to address the.
It is specifically written in the plan on page 66 of the packet. Landscaping should be included to provide a buffer from the south wind as well as to minimize the visual impact to neighbors south of West Clatt Road. And that's under the RC Park heading.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you done, Commissioner Strike? Commissioner Spring.
Yes, a couple of questions through the chair. With respect to the baseball field, you have one additional baseball field, I think, recommended, and that's for Senior League, I think, which I don't, that's different from American Legion, I'm assuming. Do you have any statistics on the demand for that baseball type of niche for Senior League? I have no concept of what that might be.
I do. And through the commissioner, or through the chair, Commissioner Spring, we had sat down with both American Legion and Diamond West Little League, and the Senior League is that in-between age. It's sort of that 14, 15, 16-year-old age where they're outgrowing the Little League field, but they're not quite ready to step up to the American Legion field. And so in sitting down with both of them, Diamond West Little League actually uses Moose Fields, which are private fields located off of, in Midtown off of 36. So I think the Moose Lodge has private fields that they use. So there was some concern going into the future if those fields would be available for them. And so we had set aside a place that would accommodate that use depending on what their needs are in the future.
Oh, that's a flex field then.
And it's a flex field. So, I think Steve Beardsley had done a great job in saying this plan really is at a 10,000-foot level, and how that field actually gets developed and gets shaped will really depend on the needs going forward of both American Legion and Diamond West Little League. We had put in a flex field and sort of that Senior League field as it's big enough, this space that's set aside is big enough for a larger field, but depending what the needs are of those organizations, we'll determine that in the development in the future.
And one more question through the chair. With respect to lighting, staff mentioned in their report that the plan should include a lighting plan, and they didn't put anything in the recommendation, so it might be a question from the staff if they believe that there should be another condition related to a lighting plan. It seems a little inconsistent between the staff report and the recommendations.
I can speak to something in the plan that discusses that. It's page 42 of the plan, which is actually page 70 of the packet under utilities and electric. And it talks about lighting is recommended for the south, the central, and the north parking lots to improve security after dark. Lighting should be designed as to minimize light pollution. And we did discuss lighting for the parking lot off of Tower Road, but we didn't want to, it was basically recommended by the advisory group not to add lighting to that parking lot because of potential impacts to the neighbors on South Clatt Road.
I'm sorry, which parking lot?
The one that would be over here. So that it wouldn't impact the neighbors directly across the West Clatt
And so that's in your cost estimate then, the 200,000 is covers that?
We put some really rough numbers together. I had Dwayne Adams from USKH, now Earthscape, put some numbers together based on what was identified in the plan. I think more extensive lighting, basically lighting is expensive. So if we do more lighting along the trails, that cost will definitely go up.
Do we have any further questions for the applicant? Mr. Robinson.
Well, just to piggyback that, I think, so you're saying you intentionally say no lighting along that lot on Tower Road, even though that's sort of the area that's been identified as the one in which people utilize to go dump and do all kinds of stuff. So in terms of activating that, there could be some, potentially the community is more likely to deal with some lights if it meant people were using that area in a more appropriate manner as well. That might be something you want to contemplate.
Through the chair, those uses will be primarily summer uses when the need for lighting won't be necessary. So the RC park will typically close down during the winter when you have snow and ice on the ground, and same with the bike park. So perhaps adding a gate to that area and closing that gate off, but still allowing access to all parts of the park through the other parking lots might be the most appropriate way to manage some of those considerations.
Gotcha. Okay.
Do we have any further questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony. The public hearing is now closed. Ms. McConnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to respond to two issues that had come up during this public hearing. One, I did look up AMC 15.70.080, which is regarding noise emissions, and the time of regulation is generally 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Additionally, I wanted to note that the owner of the property with the antennas, the square, it's kind of in the middle of that the park surrounds, MCC Radio LLC, was noticed at 301 Arctic Slope Avenue, Suite 200. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Walker.
Through the chair, if I could ask staff on that same note, as far as notifying Morris Communications, we did have this one comment from Mr. Baird, or a pretty lengthy letter, and he spoke today about not being notified, and he lives on, is it Allison Circle? And it sounded like from what was described in the letter that no one on Allison was notified, and in my mind, the houses on Allison, many of them are actually the closest homes in that area to the park. So is it possible to maybe confirm whether or not they were notified? Because that seems like a pretty big oversight to me.
Through the chair, Mr. Walker, all of the homes on Allison Drive were notified. It was my understanding that Mr. Baird was concerned about not being invited to participate in the working group effort, but he is on the list for receiving a notice of this public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Spring.
A procedural question through the chair. We're being asked to approve the master plan. Does it, or are we being asked to recommend approval to the assembly?
Through the chair, Mr. Spring, you're being asked to approve the master plan.
So through the chair, this is it, then? It stops here?
That's correct.
And if we make a recommendation to amend it, does that carry forward then into the plan?
Through the chair, Mr. Spring, if you make a recommendation or a condition of approval, that carries forward and would be addressed in the development of the amendment to the plan.
Thank you.
Okay. In case 2014-0155, Park Master Plan for South Anchorage Sports Park, what is the wish of the body? Commissioner Walker.
It seems I already have a second, but I was actually going to suggest we could, if we'd like to move to a committee of the whole, there's a few people who look like they were thinking about suggesting amendments, et cetera. That would give us a chance to get those things on the table and then approve it or not. So I move that we adjourn to a committee of the whole.
And I second.
Okay. Do we have any objection to moving to a committee of the whole? To the audience, this is a procedural that allows us to discuss the issue among ourselves without the formality of it. We will come out of this before we take any motion. but we're going into a committee of the whole, which did pass. Mr. Walker, this is your idea, so I'll let you start it.
Thank you. I don't specifically have any suggestions, but I noticed that others did, so I just wanted to get the ball rolling. John, I mean, it seemed like you might have a couple, so if you wouldn't mind kicking things off and maybe give us some momentum here.
That's my job.
yeah,
We'll go to Mr. Sprague next.
You giving me permission to redesign the park, are you? Is that what you're saying?
You're going to have to fight these two.
I'm not going to do that, of course, but it'd be fun, though. No, I think there's been a lot of work done on this. I mean, we got to be careful, I think, in our recommendation not to kind of violate the public process that's happened. So I'm going to restrain myself, I think, in my recommendations. And listening to the public testimony, however, there's some things that might be improved, or there might be some things that can be done that would maintain the integrity of the plan that I think might enhance the plan a bit. And there's a couple of suggestions, and I think the main one is the use of the lake. And it's nice to have a lake, and that's fine. I mean, but I think what the plan needs to do is promote the lake use as a winter ice skating venue. And there's nothing in the plan that really talks about it. I think the plan could be stronger in that area, and it would require commitment from the city. You know, if we made that comment or made that recommendation, to proceed with making it one of the venues in the city for outdoor winter skating. And there's one, of course, in Westchester is very popular, so that serves one part of the city. What's the one over in your neighborhood, Commissioner Robinson?
Cheney Lake.
Cheney. I love Cheney Lake. I skate over there. That serves that area. Goose Lake, that serves my neighborhood directly. And I'm trying to think, oh, yes, the Midtown Cuddy Park is one. And all those are well used by people. Other lakes are used kind of informally when there's no snow because it can't maintain it. But where's the facility in South Anchorage? Where is it? Part of Marsh, right. Well, that's not maintained. But it's not, I mean, I've never been out there in the winter because I got a closer one. But, yeah, that's a good one.
There were over 50 people on Saturday out there.
Well, there's not going to be anybody there now unless they start to use their shovels probably. But
the hockey teams show up with shovels.
Okay, and that's good. So, but the city does maintain at least 4 outdoor skating parks, and they hot mop it. They take a plow and they plow it and hot mop it. It seems like it's an oversight of the plan not to make this a facility for South Anchorage if there is not one in that area.
Can I ask a question then? Are you proposing that they are required to create an ice skating facility through this amendment, or explore the opportunities for one?
Well, that's a good question. I think we better be careful because it might not be feasible to make the pond. I don't know what the constraints are. It seems like there's a few issues raised regarding drainage and flow. And so, yes, I think we need to include it as part of the plan if the lake is developed and is feasible. Yeah, I think makes sense to include it. And to me, there's an obvious gap there.
Okay, Commissioner Kane, then Commissioner Dean.
Thank you, through the chair. You know, a lot got brought out through the testimony, but I want to reiterate that this is, a 20-year plan, and these things are going to morph over time. And there's not an operating budget here. There's just a kind of back of the napkin cost of this $9 million park. And so, whether the city down the road decides that operating cost of whatever is in the concept, that's for years down the road. So I'd be in favor of supporting this plan as presented. I don't think, or I wouldn't have anything to add to change it because of the 20-year commitment of this park. So that's all I have to say.
Commissioner Dean?
I agree with Commissioner Kane. So by saying that, that means looking back at the department recommendations that they have listed, and if any of these should actually be deleted or kept in place. Number 2, which was consider doing a study of AstroTurf on Pete, which was discussed a little bit as to whether it was necessary to do that or not. That was when I think maybe we should look at whether we should just remove that requirement entirely, because it's puts burden on the plan that at this point may not necessarily be required. Number 3, I read that sentence and I didn't see a problem with it, but okay. Number 4, verify with traffic engineering that required parking spaces are provided on site. I see parking spaces provided on site, so again, I don't understand 4 either. Number 5, include the implementation plan as a section. And I guess there isn't a implementation plan, but I don't know if that's necessary at this point either. Number 1, which is amend the legend on figure 1 to the South Anchorage Sports Park in the neighborhood context that does not appear to accurately correspond with the map. Maybe that needs to be adjusted. So I don't see most of these recommendations even needing to stay with this. So what do you guys think? Should we take some of these out? Should we modify them a little bit or leave them the way they are?
Mr. Walker?
I think I'm leaning towards not modifying it at all. And under number 2, the word consider, I think says it all. And I think that common sense pretty much is going to tell anybody that gets involved in this in the future that any kind of non-frost susceptible soils, no matter what they are not going to perform well, and it doesn't matter if you put AstroTurf on top or not. So, but that it sounds like all they were going to do was draw information from other sources. So I personally don't see a lot of reason to take any of these out of here. I'm leaning towards just approving it as is, for what it's worth.
Mr. Spring?
Just one other comment on the recommendations. I guess I'm okay with keeping the recommendations as they are, but I do think we might want to add one regarding the dog park designation, because as staff mentioned, or the petitioner mentioned, we're not really sure where the dog park is, where it's been identified. It may need to be changed, but I don't know if that requires a recommendation or a condition. But it's definitely something that needs to be done as part of the implementation of the plan.
I don't understand. What do you mean we don't know where the dog park is recommended to be?
No, we don't know where the dog park designation is actually is. I don't believe.
The existing designation.
Whether there's a conflict with what the assembly has
Yes,
provided.
right.
I see.
Sorry.
Isn't there? Didn't we see a map tonight that outlines where the dog park is currently? Does it?
That's in through the chair. Yeah, there's a map that says that, but then the petitioner said, yeah, we aren't really sure what the ordinance stated, whether that coincides with the ordinance or not.
I think you could have a condition that says verify where the dog park is identified through assembly ordinance and modify if needed.
I like that. Yeah.
Save those words. Mr. Sporhees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think maybe if it's appropriate, we could add in the recommendations that the municipality of Parks and Recs keeps working with the adjacent landowner. Morse Communication in this case, which we heard from Mr. Rurfield, that their ongoing concern is trespass, and it looks like the park was going to put up some kind of demising fence, and so maybe add that to the recommendations.
Anyone else have any comments? I personally would like to delete recommendations 2, 3, and 4. I think leaving them in establishes a bad precedent. I think we should require that the recommendations be clear and concise, and I don't believe 2, 3, and 4 meet that. 4 in particular, the traffic engineer has commented, and so we're putting a requirement on the applicant to go back and do something twice. I like Mr. Robinson's language about verifying, And I like Mr. Voorhees' language about continuing to work with Morris Communications. But I do believe that we need to clarify lighting, because I've heard two different descriptions of the lighting, one being lighting of the parking only, and one being lighting of the parking and the walkways at a pedestrian level on those. Mr. Walker, I'm guessing you got a motion to come out of the committee of the whole?
Yes.
Okay, you have a second. Mr. Voorhees. Okay, we've now come out of the committee of the whole, and we'll be functioning as the Planning and Zoning Commission again. Mr. Walker, oops, well, I'll wait for my screen to catch up with me. Mr. Walker, you indicate you want to make a motion.
I move to approve the plan as presented with the recommendations as they are, but I'm assuming someone will make a motion to amend the recommendations.
Okay, we have
I would support that.
We have a second on that motion. Do you want to speak to that motion, Mr. Walker?
Yes. I think it with one or two pretty big, fairly egregious exceptions, or people that feel like they really got left out of the process. It seems like the Parks Department and the people involved in creating this plan really brought all the stakeholders to the table, and it sounded to me like everyone is really well represented. And as someone who grew up participating in some of these non-traditional sports like biking and those types of things, and I also have dogs, it's nice to see them all included rather than just baseball fields and playgrounds, which is pretty typical for Anchorage. So I think the plan has great support from all the stakeholders. The community councils approved it. It meets the standards based on our packet, and that's all I have to say.
Mr. Robinson?
Does this motion include just recommendations 1 through 5, or does it also include the 6th proposed by staff?
Well, I'm proposing, I made the motion to approve it, and then I assume that someone's going to make a motion, then make a motion to amend.
Through the chair, can I ask staff to reiterate what their recommendation was on lighting number 6?
Yes, you may. Go ahead, Ms. O'Brien.
Through the chair, Mr. Robinson, it's another consider providing park lighting plan in the park plan.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Okay. I also, besides the lighting plan, it seems to me we want to emphasize the noise ordinance, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., and maybe add language in there that the compliance with the noise ordinance is required, so that there's some teeth if they don't comply with the noise ordinance. But but anyway, Mr. Robinson?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to amend with the main motion, and that is to add a 6th requirement to consider providing a park lighting plan in the plan to address both safety issues in parking lots and whether it is needed along trails as well.
Okay. Is that all?
For now.
Okay. Would you hit the motion button? Thank you. We have a motion. We have a second by Commissioner Kange. Commissioner Spring.
So can I verify then what we're voting on? It's we're voting on the 5 conditions that are included in the staff packet.
That's what's in Mr. Walker's motion, but now we're talking about Mr. Robinson's motion, which is only adding a sixth amendment. Reword that, what you said, Mr. Robinson, please.
I would defer to the secretary.
Okay, but your motion.
The gist of it was to consider providing a park lighting plan in the plan.
Yeah, and that was for both parking lot and trails.
And not as a requirement, as a consideration.
Okay, all right. So that is what we're voting, that is the motion, and then we'll go to the other motion.
We'll go other amendments then?
Yeah.
Or the main motion?
Right now, we can vote on this one and then go have another amendment, or we can have another amendment now.
Oh, okay. Well, there's the amendment that I brought up regarding the dog park
Can
designation.
we, Mr. Chair, can we just call the question one at a time and move through these? I think it's.
That's okay with me.
As long as we hold the main motion open for that one. Okay, the question's been called on Mr. Robinson's amendment regarding lighting, a number 6 recommendation on lighting. Any further discussion? Let's use our machines. That motion has carried. So we now have a 6th amendment. Now, Mr. Spring, do you have another motion?
Yes, I'd like to make an amendment that would add a condition number 7 regarding investigation of the dog park designation and consideration of whether or not that the designation needs to be amended to be consistent with the plan.
Maybe verify might be a better word than investigation.
Verify, okay, sure. Thank you, Chair.
That was the word that was used earlier.
Did, but the original, but I thought I'd give it a shot.
Mr. Spring, your motion was to verify that what the existing language is on the dog park and make sure it's consistent with the plan.
That'd be acceptable, yes.
I'm just trying to restate that. Mr. Robinson, have you seconded that motion?
Yes.
Mr. Sporhees, do you want to speak to that motion or something else?
Thank you. Something else.
Okay, hang on to that one. We've been asked to vote for these one at a time, so let's vote on Mr. Spring's number 7. That motion is also carried. Mr. Sporhees.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just kind of to reiterate the existing work that the municipality is doing with the adjacent landowner, I'd like to add that as an amendment with in regards to further pursuing the completion of the fence, or however they're going to work with trespass on the adjacent land. It seems like be a major concern of them tonight in their testimony. And I can kind of paraphrase that.
Yeah, a whole bunch. Continue working with the continue working with the adjacent landowner to handle the trespass issues, to resolve the trespass issues?
That would be correct, and specifically with Morris Communication.
Okay. As soon as we get our machines cleaned up, you might make that a motion, and we might have a second.
Everybody do.
What do you? Everybody's voted. Our machines, we're working off computer screens up here, and occasionally they hang up, and that's what they've done right now. What do you want us to do? Stop voting? Reset vote?
Can you do that?
Reset
Yeah,
or stop?
try that.
Okay, well, that didn't work. How about,
None of you have on the floor, do you?
no. Voting closed. What do you want us to hit? On the floor? I got on the floor, I could hit that. Okay, we got it back. Mr. Sporhees, everybody hit on the floor. Now, I'm not asking you to get on, I'm asking these 9 people to hit on the floor. It's the one on the left, the other left, on that one. Everybody hit on the floor? Okay, Mr. Voorhees, hit motion. Okay, we've got Mr. Voorhees has made a motion. Do we have a second? It's just so interesting to run a meeting like this, is all I got to say. Okay, we have a motion and we have a second, and this is to encourage the Parks Department to continue working with the adjacent landowner, Morris. Any discussion on that?
Is the motion to consider working with or to require a fence around the property?
Continue working with is what I believe we ended up with. Is that right, Mr. Voorhees?
That is correct. I think that language is sufficient, and it seems like the process is working through testimony.
Well, I heard the property owner say they'd like a fence around it, around their property. So perhaps, in their view, continuing to work with means the municipality is on the hook now to provide a full fence.
I understand that concern.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Voorhees, do you have a comment?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think as a department recommendation to continue working on the process that seems to be in place, that I didn't see in our packet, but came to light through public testimony from the landowner's representation. That is the reason why I am adding this amendment to the department recommendation, as far as considering that we make a judgment that the municipality should put a fence up or shouldn't, I don't think is our place this evening, and not the purpose of that amendment.
Okay. Mr. Kange?
Just for clarification, can we repeat the entire amendment Mr. Voorhees presented? Mr. Voorhees, could you repeat the amendment?
Okay. Continue working with the adjacent landowner to control the access problem.
I think that would be sufficient. Basically, they're just worried about current trespass that's on their property. And as this park is being developed, just to work with the current landowners that as the popularity of the park and the patrons to the park increases, that their trespass doesn't increase, is the whole gist behind that amendment.
I guess I understand the amendment and the need to work with adjacent landowners, and I think we could have done a better job with that to begin with in this case. I can't support this motion just because I think it gets a little convoluted. If the current property owner wants to put up a fence, as long as it's within municipal standards, and I guess you can do a Palisades fence now if he wanted to, that's their choice. And so I think, to me, I want to have this plan focus more on the park, so I won't be supporting that amendment.
Mr. Robinson, then Mr. Voorhees. Mr. Robinson.
I'd like to withdraw my request. Thanks.
Mr. Voorhees.
Thought I had another minute to think about it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe through public testimony, through the owner of the adjacent land, they gave 3 examples to why they were concerned about the current trespass issues going on at the park. I think that it's our appointed duty to recognize that concern, and maybe if the amendment isn't clear enough or it's too convoluted, maybe we could work out a way to address their concern, or at least put it on record.
Mr. Voorhees, maybe that could be best stated as a finding as opposed to a recommendation.
I'm on board with that.
Okay?
Thank you.
So if you would consider withdrawing your motion? Okay. All righty. Do we have any other motions before we come back to the main one? Mr. Spring?
Mr. Chair, didn't you mention something about the time, the sound?
Well, by tradition, the chair doesn't get to make a motion, so I need.
I'll make that motion then.
All I'm trying to do is ensure that we avoid issues like we've had on other one of these. And so
Yeah, I'll make a motion to add an amendment, additional condition that states that
park users must comply with the.
I think it's all park users, yeah. I was thinking primarily they're concerned with radio control,
How
but
about
I think
baseball game
all
with the
park
PA? Yeah.
users will adhere to the sound, the noise ordinance requiring activities that generate noise to occur between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m.
Do we have a second? We have a second. Mr. Kange.
Thank you through the chair. Again, I think this is a great idea. It's already municipal code that there's this noise ordinance already in place. I won't be supporting this motion as it's already municipal code. I don't think we need to reiterate it in this plan.
The reason I encouraged it, Mr. Kange, is we're finding in some cases that trying to get these enforced is not successful. I'm trying to give us some teeth on it, and I totally 100% am in agreement. It's under code already, and we shouldn't have to do it. But at the same time, I want to try to protect the neighbors who have legitimate concerns, and it's a balance on that one. Any other comments on this motion? It just disappeared. There we go. Okay. Seeing here none, please use your machine. Wait a minute. Somebody didn't vote. Somebody didn't vote. Brandon Sporhees, you haven't voted. Vote again. Okay. Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That motion carries 5-3. Okay. Do we have any other amendments before we come back to the main motion, which Mr. Sporhees will quote for us again so we all get it right?
Mr. Chair, if I remember correctly, I withdrew my motion for a finding of fact.
Yeah, you can let us go through and vote it, then we'll do our findings of facts.
I think it was Mr. Walker's main motion.
Was it Walker's?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're right.
Thank you, Mr.
Walker's.
Robinson.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. We're now voting on Mr. Walker's motion, which was to approve the master plan, including the department recommendations 1 through 5, as stated on page 15.
Mr. Chair, not to interrupt, but didn't you want to, I thought you wanted to remove recommendations 2, 3, and 4.
By tradition, I can't, so if no one makes it, I lose out once again.
Okay.
Ms. Dean? I will do that. Okay. So those that voted, I'm going to hit the reset vote.
Sorry. I forgot about.
Okay. All right. Voting in progress. What do I do now? Stop voting or reset vote? I'm in. No. Usually we end up with thumbs up and thumbs down up here is what we end up doing very quick.
So can I verbally do it then?
Ms. Dean, do you care to make a motion?
I will make a motion to amend to remove conditions 2, 3, and 4.
Do we have a second? Do we have a second? I need somebody to wave their hand.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Do we have any further discuss? Well, our machine might be working. Okay. Any further discussions before we vote? All right, this is to remove recommendations 2, 3, and 4. Please use your machines. That carries 5-3, so recommendations 2, 3, and 4 are removed. Now, back to Mr. Walker's motion, and which now, if I can read, his motion now would read to approve the park with department recommendations number 1 and number 5, and we have added 6 and 7, I believe. And 8, okay. So, but this one is for the department recommendations 1 and 5 in the main motion. Is that a fair statement?
Mr. Chair, this is for all the marbles. This is for 1, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Well, actually, 6, 7, and 8 have been adopted, so this is 1 and 5.
Excuse me, it's the main motion as amended.
As amended.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Walker, would you push motion machine? Okay, who seconded it? Okay, Ms. Dean? Yeah, I wasn't, I don't think. Okay, any discussions? Please use your machines. That motion carries. So, now, we'll start with Mr. Walker, and then we'll go to Ms. Dean, and then we'll go to Mr. Voorhees on findings. Mr. Walker.
Please excuse me, I need a minute. I didn't prepare my findings. Let's go with this. This plan appears to conform to Title 21 and has been recommended by staff. It seems to have significant buy-in from all the major stakeholders, including the community councils and the user groups representing the various uses in the park. And for these reasons, it appears to be in the public interest to pass this plan.
You have anything else?
No.
Ms. Dean.
This is a 60-plus acre park we are very fortunate to have in this area. There are many different user groups that are going to be able to have specialized areas for use. It isn't going to be just ball fields and a play field for kids. It's going to have a variety of uses. It's going to have a nice layout that's going to make easy access to all the different parts of the park.
Anything else? Mr. Voorhees and Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the finding of fact, just going to make note that Tom Murfield, the representative from Morris Communication, the adjacent property owner that has 20 acres adjacent to the west of the 60-acre park, gave public testimony that they were not notified. Staff looked into that, and they provided the address that the notification was sent to. So I want to put that on record. Also, they would like to see the continued fencing and the continued effort along the south and the eastern side of Morrison's property, the continued fencing as they've worked with the municipality of Anchorage and the Parks Department. Also in public testimony, they brought up that Clatt Road gate was 40 feet off of Clatt Road, and they are willing to remove that gate in the public interest of the park as long as the original problem of the attention of the additional, as long as the original problem of trespass and unlawful littering is considered when they remove it.
Mr. Robinson.
I'd like to note that this is a framework plan that presents a 20-year vision that must balance the feasibility of development with the needs of the community. I'd like to also state that the plan is based on, in part, extending utilities at significant expense, and that the plan has asked for some flexibility from those utilities with that extension. And finally, I'd like to note that the plan does identify a need to provide some visual buffering and landscaping along Klatt Road, in particular for residents to the south of Klatt, and that component is to be carried forward.
Does anyone else have any further findings? Okay, that completes that issue. Thank you very much for your efforts and your participation. Those people that worked on the plan, thank you. Those people that brought forth other issues, we appreciate that also. We will now take up case 2014-0174, a request to rezone from B3 to I1. Do we have a staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request to rezone approximately 2.89 acres from B3 to I1 SL district with special limitations. The petitioner requests to rezone U-Haul North subdivision Lot 1 from B3 to I1 SL. The special limitation of the I1 SL zoning is to provide 15 feet of landscape buffering and an 8-foot screening fence abutting residential zoning districts. The rezone is necessary in order to redevelop the property to accommodate the building of a new 780-unit self-storage rental building and a U-Haul vehicle truck rental business. Additionally, the U-Haul business will use the site for minor maintenance and repair of the rental trucks. The current B3 zoning does not allow for truck and heavy equipment repair, service, and storage. The petition site was replatted from 2 parcels of land into one in preparation of redevelopment of the property for the self-storage facility. Reviewing agencies provided no objection to the petitioner's request, and no community comments were received, as well as no comment was received from the Northeast Community Council. Findings, the AMC 2120-090 states that a rezone may be approved if it conforms to the comprehensive plan and meets 4 conditions of approval. Section A, conformance to the comp plan. The rezone is consistent with the draft 2014 East Anchorage District Plan, which has been recommended for approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission and is before the Assembly for public hearing on December 2nd, 2014, which is tomorrow night. Several policies in the plan that directly relate to industrial development and support this rezone are Policy 4, amendment to be consistent with the adopted district plan map, Policy 5 and 7, as it is supported by the draft 2014 East Anchorage District Plan, and Policy 27, as access to the subject property is from Boundary Avenue, which serves as the frontage road for the adjacent Glen Highway. This allows for efficient and safe access as no traffic will be routed through the residential areas. The proposed development after rezoning this property to I-1 with special limitations, the special limitation requiring buffering and screening will mitigate any potential adverse effects from industrial uses on the budding residential lot. Land use patterns, the area contains a diversity of commercial and industrial uses, and the proposed zoning is consistent with those uses. Also, the petitioner has stated that the development of the property will occur as soon as the petition site is rezoned. With that being said, the rezoning generally meets the standards for zoning map amendments found in AMC 2120-90. The rezone will allow for a more compatible zoning designation that is representative of adopted and draft plans. The screening fence should be located interior to the landscaping buffer to provide the adjoining residential use with the full benefit of the landscaping. The rezoning complies with the policies of the Anchorage 2020 Comprehensive Plan and 2014 Draft East Anchorage District Plan. The the department recommends approval of the request to rezone the petition site from B3 General Business District to I1 SL Light Industrial District with special limitation found on page 7 of the staff packet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Spring.
Yes, to the chair. A couple questions regarding the property to the northeast of the site. I know the area on the south part of the east boundary is residential, and it's zoned residential. It's a mobile home park. I'm not sure what is the property on the north 440 there? Is it an apartment or what is it exactly? I can't tell.
Okay, immediately adjacent to the subject property, it is a self-storage facility. Portion of that is self-storage, and then the other portion is apartments.
You mean there's outdoor storage?
Outdoor vehicle storage.
Oh, okay. That's why I looked at the aerial and I thought I couldn't tell. So it's one lot though, correct?
It is one lot.
So you're allowed to have two different uses like that on one lot?
I didn't do the research on that. I believe there might be some non-conforming determination going on there as far as...
Okay. Now, question is, I'm a little confused here. Bear with me. The East Anchorage Land Use Plan appears to designate this as medium-density residential.
That is correct.
So is there going to be a rezoning there? Is that what's expected, to be rezoned to residential?
Through the Commissioner, Mr. Spring, there's been nothing, there's been no application or anything from that Tract A parcel. We really don't know what's going to be, what the owner has in mind. However, it is medium intensity residential per the East Anchorage land use map. However, they're operating now with that apartment and outdoor vehicle storage, and I believe they have grandfather rights.
So I'm not sure how we treat that, I guess, as far as the buffering is concerned. If it's the 2140-10, 210I-1 or 2, or I think I got that mixed up. I think it says that the industrial land, I-1 land adjacent to a commercial district should have visual enhancement landscaping planted along each lot line adjoining a commercial district. Is that, I don't see any requirement here for that, similar to what you recommended to the south part of the east boundary. Is there you're not recommending any landscaping along that section?
And we're still speaking about the northwest corner?
Yes.
Or northeast corner, I'm sorry.
Yes, northeast corner.
If we turn to page 34 of the staff packet, the parcel in question is Tract A, I believe, and that is B3 zoning as well. So there's no, it would actually, there's no, it's all B3 zoning.
Yes, but this is going to be I-1, so the code says that I-1 has to have visual enhancement landscaping adjacent to a commercial.
That appears.
You're right about the B3.
And
adjacent to B3 doesn't have landscaping, but I-1 adjacent to commercial needs landscaping. I'm not saying I think there should be or it's really necessary, but isn't that the code? Wouldn't the code require that if it's rezoned to I-1?
It would be required. However, if we look at page 30 there's an existing one-story retail warehouse metal building that takes up, there's some structures that are abutting that right on the property line.
And it would be impossible to put that in, yet it's required. What happens then?
If they remove if the structures are ever demolished, then they would be required to.
Is it grandfathered when you rezone it? If you rezone it to I-1, it's grandfathered and you don't have to comply with the I-1 zoning. Okay.
done, Mr. Spring? Mr. Robinson, then Ms. Dean.
I can't, I don't have my original East Anchorage plan map in color, so I'm having a little trouble here. The area in question, as well as the lots to the west and south, basically that are all B3 in the plan map, are shown as industrial, identified in the East Anchorage District Plan.
Through the chair, Mr. Robinson, yes, they're designated industrial/commercial.
And there's a separate designation that's commercial?
No, there's regional commercial, industrial commercial, office low intensity. The legend is on page 8 of the staff packet on the right-hand side. And I have the color map in front of me, and the parcel in question is industrial commercial, and you can see those uses there. They have regional commercial center land use, industrial commercial, and office low intensity. Oh, and there is town center, neighborhood center.
Mr. Spring's favorite. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dean, then Mr. Walker.
Through the chair, I just had a question for when the petitioner fills out the actual application packet. And I'm curious, on page 17 of their packet, or of your packet, and the form that they filled out, they do say on here they already have pulled a permit.
That is correct.
Okay, and they also show checking off the box for seismic code as 1. Do you go through and verify, even though they've written 1, or their floodplain as none, or avalanche zone, or wetland classification, do you still check and make sure that that is correct, or do you assume that the application is correct? How do you guys normally do that? And the reason I'm getting at that is I'm going to guess that's not a seismic 1. I don't think that area has any seismic 1. I don't know if Anchorage has seismic 1 at all, but I'm going to guess it's 2 or 3. But anyway, my point is, I'm just curious, when you get these applications, do you verify that that information they've given you is correct?
Through the chair, Ms. Dean, we do go through the application and take a look at what was provided. However, I may have glossed over the seismic zone 1 there for this particular site.
It's not really relevant unless it's 4 or 5. I was just kind of surprised me when I saw the 1. But and then I did see also that they have already pulled their permit for. And when through the permit process, is that where it came up that they needed to go ahead and do the rezone? Is that how this came up?
To my knowledge, that is correct.
Okay.
And at the building, that permit, we could ask the petitioner, and I believe that relates to the self-storage portion of the facility that they're going to be building.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've got a question for staff on your recommendation. Your recommendation is provide a 15-foot landscaping buffering and an 8-foot screen fence interior to the buffering. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How do you maintain your buffering if your fence is interior? Do you end up trespassing? I hear what you're trying to do, but trying to maintain that 15 feet becomes far more difficult because you have no access except down through the planting area.
Mr. Chair, yes. I was on the fences with this one as well, so to say. So you'd have to provide access maybe through your fencing, some sort of gates, maybe, so the landscaping will be between the property line and your fence. You'd be able to access it on your own property down through there to maintain your landscaping. And when it came down to it, I looked at the new code, and this language is what the new code is going to be recommending. So in moving towards conformity, I used similar language there.
But this one was submitted under the old code.
That is correct. However, with the residential, the preferred would be to have the landscaping for the enjoyment of and for the view of the residents, the residential side.
Okay. I'm a little uncomfortable with that, but we've got a packed audience now, so we'll let the applicant come up and speak, and then we'll come back and revisit that. Hey, pardon me, Commissioner Kane.
Chair, just one more thing for clarification, that the site plan on page 30 in our packet shows the fence on the outside of that buffering. So
That's correct.
I'm a little confused with.
Well, that's what the applicant submitted, was out with the landscaping outboard of the fence. Staff said, no, we want the fencing outboard. You know, I guess we could split the baby and put the fencing right down the middle or something like that. But if we have no
I guess
further...
the way the recommendation is written, it's the correct way for the new code. So.
Yeah, but submitted under the old code. Yeah, anyway. The applicant, would you care to come forth and testify? Please state your name and spell it, unless it's Smith.
Yeah, my name is Roger Williams. I am actually representing two people. One, the general contractor, and Bradley Company, and U-Haul Corporation. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Norris is here tonight from U-Haul. The main reason we're applying for this is that the previous use of this property pretty much was not compatible with B3. It was used for a long time for vehicle storage, general junkyard, and later on was purchased by U-Haul for their new North Anchorage development. In order to make it more compliant with the use that we were doing, that we planned, for the vehicle storage, vehicle maintenance is more in compliance with an outdoor vehicle maintenance, outdoor vehicle storage is more in compliant with the I-1, the light industrial use. And as you brought up some of the screening issues, yeah, we've had a little bit of problems with those too, trying to figure out how we're going to maintain them. But the idea for the screening is to screen from the residential side. We're trying to find a way to deal with that, I guess, in order to maintain those. But that's really the only problem we have with the recommendation from the municipality. Other than that, we're pretty much in agreement.
Do you, looking on the east side, pardon me, Mr. Spring, I stepped on you, but looking on the east side where you're planning to construct the proposed three-story self-storage building, do we need fencing there at all?
Well, again, it is required. The fence, there is an existing fence there right now, and a screening, landscape screening is required along that side.
I'm differentiating here between the fence and the screening, okay, and the landscaping.
Oh, the landscape.
If we took the fencing and tied it into the building on the north and south ends and got rid of that fencing, because we're asking you to maintain an 8-foot wide section with a 3-story building here and a chain link fence here.
Right.
And to me, I think everybody would be better served if we terminated the fence at the north and south end of the building.
That is exactly the plan.
Section of the building.
That is exactly the plan. So the building essentially would be a fence, albeit 30 feet high.
And then, which would you prefer, the fencing outboard or inboard of the landscaping?
What we would prefer is a way to maintain the landscaping easily.
they offered the gates.
Yes, the gates would be, if the gates access by gates would be just fine.
Commissioner Spring.
So what kind of screening fence do you envision being built there? What's it going to look like?
We're working with, right now, with some landscape design. We don't have anything, defined just yet, but we are working with landscape design to come up with an acceptable one, which we will present to zoning.
Then through the chair, then staff, what's the requirement for screening? What does screening fence mean?
It's opaque fencing, and I don't think it can be the slats. I think they're talking about wood, if I'm not, or, something like a wood fence. Ms. McConnell and I jointly wrote that section, I think.
Well, through the chair, Mr. Spring and Chair Ferguson, the old code has a definition for screening structure, which means a decorative wood fence 4 feet to 6 feet high. So we have an issue here that do we kind of take the concept of screening in that it's decorative wood fence, but this limits it to no more than 6 feet high, and this is clearly meant to be 8 feet high. So it's one of those things about the old code that really isn't very clear. So it's not entirely clear what a screening fence is intended to look like. There have definitely been examples in many other cases where chain link with slats or a fabric covering has been approved as a screening fence. So I think should no more particular direction be given, that would end up being acceptable.
And one follow-up to the chair, what's your security requirements for that site? I mean, is that going to meet your security requirements to have a 8-foot decorative fence?
I would rather, the security is more defined, the security of the area is more defined by the corporation, by U-Haul, and I'd rather have Mr. Norris describe that rather than me take a pick at it.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know what this fence is.
It is going to be secured all around. I mean, we're not talking about concertina wire on the top of the.
Well, that's what I was
security.
getting at.
Nothing like that, no.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You want Mr. Norris to come up, Mr. Spring? No. Okay, did we interrupt you? Are you done?
No.
Okay, do we have any further questions for the applicant? Mr. Cage?
Well, I guess not for the applicant, for staff now, we're going with, the old code says 6 foot, but they're requiring an 8 foot, so
Is 8 foot, Ms. McConnell, is 8 foot our request or their request or
Through Commissioner Cage, Commissioner Ferguson, 8 foot was proposed by the applicant, and we have no issues with that. It's just that the only definition we have in code regarding a screening structure limits it to 4 to 6 feet. So I have trouble saying what the applicant is proposing has to fall under the definition of screening structure when the city has a limit on how high a screening structure can be. If you, just as another example, in the standards for self-storage facilities, section 2145-290, it does note that site obscuring fencing structures may be constructed of concrete, solid wood, or chain link with a neutral color fabric screening or vinyl covering. So that's another example of where it really is kind of wide open.
well, you could interpret the building as being concrete.
The building is allowed to be fencing.
So I would say we've got part of the problem solved.
We got 300 feet of it taken care of, yes.
Okay, well, I mean, you sat through the park debate earlier. You see,
I'm glad I'm not doing a park.
Okay, Mr. Walker.
My question is for staff. So what you've done effectively here is you've tried to draw from the new code to clarify the ambiguity of the old code. Is that, and that's an acceptable approach to sort of meld the two together? I mean, I don't have a problem with it, but I'm just asking.
Through the chair, Mr. Walker, no, we were not trying to apply the new code in a situation where the old code was requested by the applicant. we looked at the situation of what is the purpose of the screening, the landscaping, and the fencing, and felt that the purpose of the landscaping is achieved better by having the landscaping on the side of the neighboring residential properties rather than inside the fence. So while, yes, this type of requirement is included in certain places in the new code, really, this is a kind of an at-will entitlement. It's not a requirement of code. It's something that the commission and the assembly may choose to place on this rezoning as a special limitation, and frankly can propose anything that's at least as strict as what the applicant has proposed. So it's not really related to what's in the new code. Thank you.
This is a real-life situation is what happened.
So we're not, I guess what I'm asking is, we are not acting contrary to the old code if we approve an 8-foot tall fence?
No, you're not.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
I get staff's recommendation. I'm not sure that it's there's nothing worse than somebody's landscaping that gathers trash and doesn't look good. I mean, I'd rather be looking at a fence with mature trees growing up on the other side of the fence to block anything else vertical. It seems to be that that's a sort of a personal judgment call, but that's my opinion.
Anyone? Okay. Do you want to testify, U-Haul?
Do you want anything to say, John?
Okay, please come on up. You've got time. Thank you. So state your name for the record, please.
Okay, I'm John R. Norris, N-O-R-R-I-S. I'm the marketing company president for U-Haul of Alaska.
What are your security requirements?
Well, for security, all of it is in-house. This is a contained 3-story facility, so all security for our facilities are within that building. So the fence is only for your purposes, not mine. And so I prefer people to be able to look over fences. I don't really want any fences, but the biggest concern that I would have is the maintenance of the vegetation and all the landscaping. So it does require a bit of a concern for us to be able to get through that gate and fence and clean up. And 8 fence, I don't have any. I'm not sure where 8 foot really came from, Raj, but 4 or 6 is by all means better. So that's really all I have to say.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Norris? All righty. There is no rebuttal because pardon me. I now open the public hearing for case 2014-0174. Mr. Norris, don't go too far. Anyone care to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing none. Does the applicant have any rebuttal to the testimony? Okay. I now close the public testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What's the wish of the body, Mr. Wahoo? Mr. Spring.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion with respect to case 2014-0174, request to rezone approximately 2.89 acres from B3 to I1SL, district with special limitations. I move to recommend approval of the rezoning with one special limitation, which would state slightly different from the staff recommendation, provided 15 feet of landscape buffering and 6-foot screening fence abutting the residential zoning districts.
Could you clarify that the building?
I would clarify, I left out intentionally fence interior to the landscape buffer. So it would be exterior to the landscape buffer.
Okay. And the building can work as the fence.
Well, the building's not adjacent to a residential zoning district, so it doesn't require that. I mean, this special limitation doesn't require
Isn't there an
landscape buffer.
existing building adjacent to the, kind of on the east boundary? toward the
That's a good question. I think there is one small building that is probably to this adjacent to, but the main building that we were talking about, the large building, is adjacent to the commercial district.
So what you're, just to sorry, I'm speaking out of order here, but so to clarify, you're just moving the fence exterior to the property line instead of keeping it on the.
And reducing it to 6 feet.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Ms. McConnell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you could just give us 1 minute, there is a requirement for self-storage and vehicle storage yards to have an 8-foot fence, and so I'd like to make sure that we understand whether this use qualifies as a vehicle storage yard, considering they will be doing truck rental, truck repair, and I just want to look up the definition of vehicle storage yard to make sure that I'm...
You look that up. I have a question for Mr. Spring. Mr. Spring, why do you not want to use the building as part of the fence? I think that gives us a better appearance.
Well, when I asked staff previously about that, the building and requirements along that section, she said that because it's already existing building, that it's grandfathered, that you wouldn't have to put in a fence along there. This section, the area on the east boundary, the north 440 feet is adjacent to a commercial area. And when I asked staff, well, it looks like that might fall under the requirements for visual enhancement landscaping. They said, no, it doesn't, because it's grandfathered. The building's adjacent to right on the property line, therefore it wouldn't be required to have the visual landscaping. Well, there's no landscape. The landscaping is only on the east side.
They show landscaping on both sides.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yes.
This is residential here?
No, this is
I think we got it solved.
This fence thing.
That's a landscaping buffer along the building, Mr. Spring. That's what they're showing. The pochade line.
All right, well, I'm corrected then.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So I do believe this qualifies partly as a vehicle storage yard because there could be fully operable vehicles on site for more than 72 hours at a time if they don't have them rented out at all times. So I do believe the fence needs to be at least 8 feet. Additionally, the building is allowed, the new building, the new self-storage facility building is away from the lot line with a landscaped visual enhancement landscaping, and a building is only allowed to count as a fence if it's at the lot line. So they would also need a fence in that location.
So we end up with two fences back to back. It just, from the appearance, Mr. Walker?
Well,
how do we end up with two fences back to back?
Yeah, we do.
I'm asking you how. I don't understand your statement.
The applicant may get invited to come back up, but if you were to draw, actually, I see three fences. They're But see, the proposed three-story self-storage building is one rectangle, and you have a line off it with an X. You got the next line over with an X, and you got the next line over with an X. Come back and explain it to us. This is part of your rebuttal time.
Yes. What we have here is essentially an as-built survey overlaying the new building construction and the proposals. The first line to the left that you see running down with the X's through that indicates an existing fence. And that is actually on the property to the west, just a couple of feet. The next line you see down there is the proposed fence that we would have to be putting up.
I disagree with that interpretation, but keep on going.
Okay.
What's the third X?
Well, you've got another one in there that is also showing another adjacent. I mean, it's a chain link fence. It's not in very good shape. That's also sitting on the property to the east. The one that you see down the property line is the one that we're proposing, and you see that I've identified that as 8-foot screening fence.
At the bottom, it's identified that, and there's that line. But we go up there and we end up with three fences in
Yeah,
there.
those are existing, and those are on the other property.
But from what Ms. McConnell said, and I believe she's reading the code correctly, is that we really don't have a choice then.
That's right.
Why is the building not on the property line?
It was required, when we brought it in, it was required to set off the property line. That came through the building permit review. And we already have, it's not going to move now, our foundation's in.
Okay? Building's not moving.
Not at this point.
We got a motion to approve by Spring. We got a question from Robinson. We'll go to Robinson first. Commissioner Robinson.
Yeah, I just make the comment. I mean, really, we're looking at a rezoning, and then we're diving into the entire site plan. I think staff's special limitation was really geared at one specific portion of this lot, knowing that it's within our authority to recommend something above and beyond what's required by code. We've amended what they were trying to get at, and sort of, I think, through Mr. Spring's main motion. The difference being we now have to potentially go back to 8 feet, or we can't require less than what is required by code, but we're still emphasizing that there's a 15-foot buffer in the area that's adjacent to the residential district. That's the portion of the SL that I think is important. The rest is what's already dictated in the code when they go in for their building permit. And I think my opinion is leave the rest of it alone.
I think that's sage advice. Mr. Spring, would you care to restate your motion?
Well, I'm not sure that it needs to be restated, given what Commissioner Robinson said. I mean, the special limitation applies to only the residential zone land. The 8-foot screen visual enhancement landscaping on the west side is required by code because it's now I-1 and it's adjacent to commercial. So it's taken care of by the building review, and it's not necessary to add a special limitation on top of a requirement. So I don't believe that the motion needs to be changed.
Okay, so we're back to provide 15 feet of landscape buffering and an 8-foot screening fence.
The 6-foot, I believe is what I said.
No, but Ms. McConnell said the code requires 8 foot.
Oh, sorry.
As a vehicle storage yard.
I think I would recommend the following, so here's an amendment to that motion, if you will, take it or leave it. But provide 15 foot of landscape buffering and a minimum 6-foot screening fence on the lot line buffering the residential zoning district. On the lot line abutting the residential zoning district. Well, if it has to be 8, it has to be 8. If it can be 6, that's our special limitation. If they come in and it has to be 8 because the code says 8, then it has to be 8.
Ms. McConnell, did you follow that?
I would recommend using the language at least 6 feet, which allows it to be 8 if the code requires 8.
That's what I said, minimum 6
Okay.
feet.
I apologize. Thank you.
Ms. McConnell, do you see an issue with Mr. Robinson's rewording? I'll get to that in a second.
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Spring, have you withdrawn your motion or agreed to the rewording? We don't have friendly motions, so okay, Mr. Spring has withdrawn his motion. Thank you very much. Mr. Robinson, will you make that as a motion?
Oh, I thought I was amending it, but here, I'll make it all over. So I recommend approval, a recommendation to the Assembly of the request to rezone the petition site from B3 to I1SL, light industrial with special limitations, subject to the following special limitation. Provide 15 feet of landscape buffering and a minimum 6-foot screening fence abutting the residential zoning district.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a second. Do we have any discussion? Mr. Spring?
I can make findings now or after the vote.
Okay. All right. Let's use our machines if they're working. Okay, thank you. Mr. Robinson, and then Mr. Spring, and then Mr. Walker on findings. The motion carried, by the way.
Yeah, I recommended approval of this rezoning in that we've identified a lack of industrial land in the municipality. It's consistent with the recently recommended for adoption East Anchorage District Plan, and where it abuts residential zoning, there's some recommended mitigation to make those two uses as compatible as possible.
Mr. Spring, do you have anything to add?
Does it, except that I'd like to say that it meets the standards of the zoning map amendments, if that wasn't included already.
Okay.
And if the buffering provides sufficient protection for the mobile home development to the east.
Mr. Walker, you seconded. Do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have anything on this case to add? Thank you very much. Before we adjourn, I remind everybody that if something comes up for next week and you can't be here, please let me know as soon as possible on that one. And pick up your packets on the way down. Ms. McConnell, do you have anything to add? Thank you very much. We are adjourned. Have a good evening. Mr. Strike made that motion, seconded by Mr. Walker.